you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members.
And we are back. I'm Chris Evans, the CEO of Survival Dispatch, joined tonight by my good friend Khalid Muhammad, Jeff MD, Randy Names, and of course Mike Glover in the second half because it's Wednesday night. And the main topic that we'll tackle when Mike joins us is post 9/11 2.0 complex coordinated terrorist attacks, hunting the networks. It's a perfect topic for Mike Glover. The theme is essentially targeting terrorist, cartel, gang, and insurgent logistics and leadership, again, post 9/11 2.0. And it's pretty clear the mission is going to be to disrupt their supply lines, demolish their safe houses, get rid of their command nodes for all of the groups that I just mentioned. Again, it's just a perfect topic for Mike Glover. I'm really glad that he's joining us for that one tonight. Before I bring everybody on stage for that, I want to give a shout out to our friends at Noble Gold, because here's another interesting graph of what's happened. Look, from 1973, the last time, well, close to the last time Fort Knox was audited. What happened to that, by the way? If anybody knows why or what happened to the audit for Fort Knox, if you could throw it in the live chat, I would love to hear about it, because I have not been able to find anything to that effect. Regardless, gold has been on a tear, as you can see. It's way up. It's still well over $4,000 an ounce. From what I'm told by people who are much smarter than I am and are experts in the financial space, it's going to continue to go that way, especially if Donald Trump succeeds in backing the American dollar with gold, crypto like Bitcoin, and oil. I also heard, I think it's like the minister of finance or something like that from Israel. Not that, I'm super fond of them, but he said that if Trump manages to pull that off, you can expect gold to go over $100,000 an ounce, which is just insane. So point being is that it looks like gold is a really solid place to be. And as I mentioned before, I don't know Kevin Sorbo. Usually I know, somebody who's on the cover of these big companies, because I've been blessed to have this massive Rolodex. My friend Patrick Byrne, he's 6'5", and y'all may recall he was the CEO of Overstock. His father was the original guy with Warren Buffett that made him his first $1 billion. He likes to say he's a whole lot taller and better looking when he stands on his wallet. And I said to him, well, I'm going to steal that, because I'm a whole lot taller and better looking when I stand in my Rolodex. I'm just over 22,800 contacts now in my address book. Just had an incredible business career and blessed to meet some phenomenal people. But anyway, Charlie Kirk is what turned me on to these guys. And it wasn't direct. I did not know Charlie directly, but he felt that these guys were the best of them all as far as gold's concerned. This is not in my wheelhouse. I'm not an investment type of guy, but I'll tell you what I do know is that several Survival Dispatch longtime followers had these guys take some of their retirement savings and put them back put them over in a gold-backed IRA. And clearly the returns have been far more significant than most people's 401ks, of course, which follow, the stock exchange. So the people I've spoke to who are actual expert in this are saying, look, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, but taking part of your investment or your, retirement investments, putting them into a gold-backed IRA, same deal. You're not paying taxes on it till you withdraw, but it takes you away from that volatility of the stock market. So noblegoldinvestments.com. I don't have a discount code or anything like that. All I can tell you is there's a link down in the description. Sounds like a pretty solid deal, especially based on what some of our very devout followers have had result-wise. So with that being said, we're going to jump right into the conflicted question of the night. Let me get us over here to the rest of the stage with the guys. Good to see you all tonight. So if you're not familiar with and from top to bottom, by the way, you missed this, Randy. So I don't know who came up with this, Randy, one of our awesome people in the audience. We were trying to come up with something better than 008 for Khalid, and they came up with a new handle for him. He's single aught 711.
Oh man.
I mean, talk about being undercover. Nobody would ever figure that one out.
That
Right?
was very creative. Whoever came up with that.
Whoever came up with that one, it was really thinking that night.
I mean, hats off from a creative point.
Couple in, right?
Yeah. So conflictatthegame.com, there's 14 card decks, all set in post-apocalyptic scenarios, and they have these questions. 99% of them have some element of morality to them, hence the name Conflicted. So here we go. Nelson had survived several encounters with death, largely due to the group of people he belonged to. They were few in number, but loyal friends who were well organized. Supplies were extremely low, but they were getting by. While moving around with his group, Nelson ran into an old fiance. She had someone with her, and both of them wanted to join Nelson's group. Nelson said this was a group decision. If you were in Nelson's group, would you be willing to add people who brought little to the table into your group? Why or why not? Interesting question there. Interesting question. So the first item up, and I changed the order of the brief around ever so slightly, but I want to hear y'all's position on this, and I definitely want to hear what the audience's position on this. But, and you know what? I pulled the dang wrong one up here. Give me 2 seconds. That's not the one that I wanted. I shouldn't have changed it at the last minute. There's an article out there. You know what? Well, we'll just do it off the cuff instead, because I shouldn't have changed I should not have changed the brief at the last minute. What I want to know is what y'all think of Trump telling Argentina that they can bring their beef into our country while we've had tens of thousands of ranchers get smoked in the past few years. Personally, I'm just shaking my head at some of the decisions that this administration's making. Randy, I'm going to come to you first as far as your thoughts on that are concerned.
Well, I'm like, why would America ever import beef? I don't understand that either. There's no reason for us to do that. We have plenty of land. Now I don't know what, I know that there have been farmers that have been paid not to farm. I have no idea how all these cattle ranchers are doing. But last time I checked, between hamburgers and steaks, we've never had a shortage of one of beef around here. And why we would import it from a third world country, in my opinion, from South America, makes absolutely zero sense to me.
Same. It's less than 0 cents. So I found the article, or the post, I should say. It's from Tommy Lauren. Pardon the French here, but I actually, if you're going to use a 4-letter word, this is a good subject for it. Why the actual fuck would we buy Argentinian beef? Our American ranchers are getting crushed already by cheap shit foreign beef imports. The meat packers are already undercutting our American producers as it is. This is an outrage. It is an outrage. I mean, Jeff, what are your thoughts on this?
There's 2 sides to the coin, though. During COVID and in the last few years, the American beef, the beef herds, national beef herds, dropped to record lows because they were sending beef to slaughter because they couldn't afford to feed them. So the herd is low, and it takes time to rebuild. And if you import beef from Argentina temporarily, what it does is it means that beef producers here don't have to slaughter the cattle, the yearlings, to make, to feed the people. So that way it gives them a little breathing room so that they can rebuild their herds. And then once the herds are built up, you can sustain higher beef production. But we've been at low production for a long time. And yeah, there's no shortage of beef, but if you look, the price has gone through the frickin' roof too, because there's just not that much. Yeah. That's one. The other one is, I think he's throwing a bone to Milei in Argentina, because they're under a lot of pressure, especially Argentina domestically, to reverse the reforms and go back to the socialist government that had basically destroyed the country for 20 years because the idiots have no memory. So that's why you see him basically throwing them a bone by allowing Argentine beef and soybean imports to kind of bolster their economy a bit to get them through a rough patch. So, I understand why the American beef producers are pissed about it. I get that. But at the same time, there's really not enough beef to meet demand. People have cut back because of the price. And, it's a supply and demand issue. But you got to give our herds breathing room so they can rebuild to where they should be.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, Jeff. I don't have anything to say otherwise. I will throw this out there that most people aren't aware of is Florida and Texas flip-flop back and forth every year for the number one beef producer in the nation. Most people think Florida beaches, theme parks, that kind of stuff, but especially the Panhandle and central Northwest Florida, huge ranches. Khalid, go ahead.
One thing on the Florida thing, the reason why Florida is perfect for beef, their silage grows all year round.
Correct.
They don't have seasons, so they don't have to build up hay for the winter. Their grass grows year round, so the cows can graze constantly.
A true story. Khalid, I want to hear you weigh in on this for a very specific reason. Do you guys purchase beef from China by chance? Because I was told today that we're sending beef to China. China is processing it, and they're sending it back here laden with things like MSG and sodium for all these ultra processed foods. It's insanity.
Not here. What happens here is we still have the old butcher system. Every morning, 5 a.m., they go out, they take 4 cows, and they butcher them and they clean them up and they bring them into the shop, and you buy fresh meat all day long. So we still have our own, cattle that we're eating. But as far as the U.S. goes, you've got a lot of lab grown meat starting in the U.S. as well. I mean, you've got the Israeli technology that's printing steaks now. I don't know where the U.S. is headed with this. I think Jeff's right that there's a shortage now of cows and a shortage of beef, but importing from Argentina, that creates a dependency that you really don't want to have, because you don't know what the FDA has their own standards for beef and Argentina has their own standards for beef, and you don't know what's coming into the country.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why you can't bring any of that stuff either, whether it be fruit, vegetables, meat.
Well,
you can't bring it in.
Yeah. It's got to be they are subject to USDA inspections overseas, so they have to pay for USDA inspections in Argentina before they can export it. But as far as the lab grown meat and the Beyond Meat, those companies are failing. Beyond Meat is about to go out of business. They tried to restructure their debt. Nobody wanted it. They're going to go tits up probably within 6 months.
That was the dumbest idea to begin with.
Well, yeah, and Bill Gates was behind it, but when they got in trouble, he walked away. Yep. He wasn't willing to put good money after.
Well, he don't like to lose money.
Yeah.
So with that being said, before we move on to the next one, I got to say this, and these are the Carnival is the best sponsor we've ever worked with at Survival Dispatch, and everything is 100% American. The beef is 100% American, chicken, pork, the bags, the O2 absorbers. This is the highest quality stuff you're going to get. And I've got a friend named Josh Bryant who is literally a living legend in the strength and fitness community. And he tried it, for maybe 2 weeks and came back and said, this stuff is incredible. He's got his master's and all of this stuff. And he said to me, 25 grams of protein, one serving of the beef from Carnival. For many ultra processed foods, you would have to eat somewhere between 50 and 75 grams of the crap that they're pumping out to get anywhere near the same, type of quality from this. So let's get into the first one from you, Khalid, because this has got to be like, I know on Sunday night, we do the hero of the day, every episode of Survival Dispatch News, but on Sunday nights on the Sea Heaven show, we do the retard of the day. And I think this guy is probably the retard of the day. Go ahead and explain why that is, Khalid.
This guy, I don't understand. I mean, to the ISI, I was CIA. To the Israelis, I'm IRGC. To To the Iranis, I am Mossad. I don't know which intelligence agency I'm going to get attached to on what day.
Well, if you're CIA, you sure as hell never went to any of the damn staff meetings.
Well, I tried not to, Jeff. I mean, that would blow my coverage.
I did too. I kept getting fought.
Too close to the flagpole.
Listen, if you're American, Khalid will always be part of 7-Eleven. That's the intelligence that we have on.
Yeah.
Great
But this
gig, by the way.
Huh?
A great undercover gig, by the way. Nobody would ever suspect it, right?
No. The thing I don't get is this guy himself is Irani. He writes for Israeli newspapers and for Israeli publications. I put up a video. I mean, I'll be honest. I put up a video of a MiG-29 landing in Tehran. And he picked it up and said, IRGC PSYOPs team. I went, oh my God, you're calling us IRGC? Have you read anything we've written? The post right below it is us pointing out that Israel had uncovered an Iranian nuclear site. And you're so dumb you called me IRGC? I went, are you kidding? I felt like going, okay, let's see. How many different intelligence agencies am I going to be associated with without ever working for any of them?
All of them.
Yeah. So you must have one hell of a retirement plan with all these.
Yeah, I mean, for all the agencies we've worked with, I have, to be really honest, I've been associated online. The Indians have called us the ISI's Black Ops team. The Israelis call us IRGC. The Iranis call us CIA. And I'm going, where's all my retirement money? I mean, come on. Where are all these paychecks I should be getting from all these agencies?
Boy,
We have a mailbox money coming in by now.
Yeah, exactly. So, Jeff, I got to go to you on this next one here. And it's one of Khalid's posts. Of course, we're doing the Command 11 sit rep right now. But Ivana Hughes, a Serbian Americana chemist and president of the American. Oh, okay. I'm looking at it going, I don't know what that word is, but okay. Serbian American chemist. That makes a lot more sense. And president of the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation told Tucker Carlson a nuclear blast in New York City's Times Square could leave 1.5 million dead instantly, with another 2 million people, I'm assuming, severely injured. Everyone would also like to likely get third degree burns within the concentric circle of extremely high temperature. It's all happened before in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, she said, where people's skin literally melted after the U.S. bombings. There's something to add to your nightmares as 9/11 2.0 quickly approaches without any action from federal or law enforcement. So I'm not sure exactly what this person said, Jeff, on Tucker Carlson, but the only people who could launch a nuclear warhead of that size is us, China, and Russia that I'm aware of. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You don't have to launch it, though.
Yeah.
You can smuggle it in a truck and set it off.
Yeah.
And ICBM wise, but you could use a short range and launch it from a freaking cargo ship offshore.
Okay, maybe so my understanding from going in depth with Mike Sterling on this is that you need elevation. If you let it off at ground level, it greatly mitigates the damage. So,
but you could put it on an airplane. I mean, if it's small and they're not that big, they're not that heavy, you could put it on a cargo plane, fly it at 5,000 feet, set it off, boom. Because I think the Hiroshima bomb detonated at 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 feet.
Okay.
Nagasaki about the same. You want to get the blast effect. But delivering it's not the issue. Getting it's the freaking issue. There's only a handful of countries in the world that have these things, and none of them are very eager to give them up because, one, they're a national asset, and two, DOE is very good at pinpointing exactly where the fissile material came from. And oh my God, would there be hell to pay, because they'd know within a few days. I mean, we got so good with the Russians. We could tell you that if it was plutonium, we could tell you it came from the Mayak plant in the Urals. It came from reactor number 4, and it was made between June and September of 1969.
Wow.
I mean, we were that good.
Yeah.
And so they would know exactly where that crap came from within a heartbeat.
Can I throw in a question for you, Jeff?
Go ahead, Khalid.
If you watch what Khomeini's been saying lately, he's gotten really bold in his comments. I mean, if you saw the interview the other day he did with Irani media, he was literally challenging Trump to attack Iran. Last night when we had S2 on, when S2 and I did the Command 11 sit rep show, we got deep into this, that why is Khomeini so arrogant about this? And we got into the conversation that what if he's got what if he's got fissionable nuclear material?
Okay. Well, he would need, they had 60, they would need 90%. And even at 90%, you're talking a large device, because the higher the enrichment, the smaller the device you can make. And if you have plutonium and you've got implosion technology, you can make a much smaller device. But the thing, okay, uranium device, yeah, you can probably be assured with pretty good certainty that it will work without testing. That's why we never tested a uranium device before we dropped it on Hiroshima. We only tested the plutonium because we weren't sure if it would work.
Right.
That said, most countries want to test. You're not going to go bluster until you're not going to threaten somebody until you make sure your gun's loaded. So I don't see them, trying to start a war if they have one device or two devices, because they'll go off and they'll cause damage, but they'll lose their entire freaking country as a result of it, because Trump will go full medieval on their ass. But most countries like to test because, India did it, Pakistan did it, even Israel did it, and South Africa did it. And it's really hard to get away with that, especially if it's an underground test, because those are detectable. Israel worked with, from what I understand, I haven't seen the intelligence, and if I had, I couldn't report on it, but I've seen open source that speculate that Iran worked with South Africa to test the device in the South Atlantic at sea, in part of the Atlantic where there's no shipping. And so there was no seismic to go around the world. It wasn't in the ground, so there wasn't a seismic wave. There was a flash, but there was no wave. And so it wasn't as detectable. But Iran doesn't really have that option. Where they're going to put it on a boat and go to, drive it 6,000 miles and set it off and hope to God no one sees it. And now there's so many more satellites in there, you couldn't get away with it. So it may be bluster, or his own people may have been lying to him. I mean, Saddam's people were telling him, yeah, man, we're just weeks away from having a device. They were never close to having a device, but they kept promising him, because he said, if you don't give me a device, I'll kill you. Well, guess what? I'll get you a device. Absolutely, I'll get you this time next week. Since to keep yourself from getting hung.
Since you're on that topic, Jeff, how many inspection reports of the Soviet Union's nuclear stockpile were fudged because people were told that they would either get a promotion, or if they didn't get the job done, they'd probably risk. Mike Sterling brought it up and said there was a lot of fraud that went on in the Soviet Union with regards to the maintenance of their nuclear stockpile.
Yeah, in most totalitarian regimes, you'll see that. In North Korea, they found out that people they had petroleum reserves of diesel for their tanks or whatever. And what they were doing was selling it off on the black market, and they would just pour water into the tanks because the water sunk, the diesel floated. And so you have this tank that's supposed to be 100,000 gallons. There's 10,000 gallons on the top and 90,000 gallons of water below it.
Wow.
The Russians, they were great at building. They were horrible at maintaining, which is one of the reasons Chernobyl blew up. They weren't good at that part. And they falsified. And one of the reasons we messed up, the CIA, we would intercept these reports and we would acquire them, us and NSA and all that. And we made the mistake of assuming they weren't lying to themselves.
Oh, wow.
They were lying to themselves. If you're running a factory and Moscow says you will produce 1,000 tanks this month and you produce 800, you go, yeah, 1,000, 800 equals 1,000. They constantly fudge their production numbers just to save their asses. And the other thing is the Russians would overstate what they had to kind of intimidate us. And in the 50s, the thing was the missile gap. The Russians claimed they had thousands of missiles they didn't have. And we believed them. And so we rushed headlong to make more missiles so we could close the missile gap under Eisenhower. There never was a missile gap.
Very interesting. So, Randy, the next one's for you. I got a quick question though, and then I've got to have Khalid kind of explain who these guys are. But there's one thing that really stood out to me here, and I was thinking of you when you were serving in GWAT. Look at the size of some of these guys over here on the right side of the picture.
Yeah.
I mean, what was your experience as far as, the insurgents in Iraq, as far as their physical stature was concerned? I don't recall ever seeing jihadis that look like giant guys like these guys.
No, honestly, most of them were young, you know what I mean? Even in their teens, but certainly early 20s, usually skinny kids were a lot of the folks. Now, the people running the cells, these guys were older, but they were fat, big fat dudes, you know what I mean, generally. And that's kind of, but I never saw, that look, our side, we looked like that, we look like those guys over there on the right. But yeah, if you look in the middle, that's more about what I'm talking about. And all the way over to this guy to the far left, it looks like maybe blue top. I don't know, but he looks a little more rounder. That would be like an older guy, when all the people on the street were those guys in the middle right there.
Yeah, I thank you for confirming that. So I can't even pronounce these guys' name, Khalid. Explain who these guys are again, please.
All right, let me take you back to the beginning of the story. Yesterday, this Farkat al-Ghurab, Jilani, on French intelligence orders, has launched a campaign against this jihadi group. This jihadi group moved to Syria from France to help them overthrow the Assad regime. And they have been there for a while. Yesterday, because French intelligence, these guys, yeah.
Time out. Are you telling me that waves of Middle Easterners who went to France have left France to go back to the Middle East? These guys came
back. These guys came back in like 2017, 2018 to Syria to help Jilani overthrow the Assad government.
Okay.
There's a rumor that these guys were involved in the Paris attack, the 2015 Paris attack. So
well,
French
I was going
to
say they probably weren't in France to begin with for no reason.
Yeah, the story is that these guys were involved in the Paris attack in 2015. Mm-hmm. Then in 2017, they moved to Syria on HTS's request. They're a branch of Al Qaeda. Farkat al-Ghurab is a branch of Al Qaeda. They were operating in Europe. They moved to Syria in 2017, 2018 to help Jilani overthrow the Assad government. The leader of this group was put in jail in 2020 by Jilani for 17 months. Then he was released. Now, as of yesterday, they started an attack on these guys to remove them from Syria altogether. What ended up happening is they turned around and they called all the other foreign jihadi groups and said, come help us. And the Uzbeks came, the Uyghurs came, and now you have a civil war that started in Idlib. You've got coalition drones over on top. It's unbelievable what's going on, because what Jilani could have never wanted, he's trying to appease the French, because the UK has lifted the terrorist label from HTS as of this morning. So now he's trying to appease the French so that he can take money in diplomatic relations with the French, start a war with one of his allies. And that ally happens to live right in your country, and they came to help you to begin with. Now all the foreign jihadi groups are going, wait a minute, hold on, we came here to help you. Now you're going to try and kill all of us.
Yeah, just incredible when you think about it. But Randy, I don't know if you have anything else to add, but I do want to ask you about the apparent, let's say, significant increase in capabilities and training that these jihadis have today versus 20 years ago. It seems like they've made quantum leaps.
Yeah, I would concur. I mean, it's a drastic difference in what I saw in 2006 compared to what we're looking at today. It's there's so much of a drastic difference that it's almost hard to believe. Now I'm looking at professional fighters, and for one, just like those guys we just looked at, you know what I mean? They were in France for a reason. Those were the guys that were there to do whatever they were, basically what's going on now. And when the heavy lifting started, that's what those guys are there. They went back there because, wow, they're just going to get more experience. And they're kind of like the paid protesters that move all around the United States. These guys are probably paid fighters. In 2006 in Iraq, I know it wasn't that way in the beginning of Afghanistan or even Iraq, But once both got going, and by the time 05 and 06, you start hearing foreign fighters, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Because they weren't from Iraq. They weren't from Afghanistan. They came from in point in fact, the sniper, right, that was so famous there in 06, 07, whatever the time frame was, where we even changed our tactics, not special operations, but the conventional forces did, because the sniper was so successful at killing the gunners going by that were in the turrets of the, you know, the turret guns of the vehicles going by. He was a foreign fighter. That's what they called them then. It's no different. When they need those professionals to come in, we, as Khalid's already talked about many times, and I watched this video of this imam, I guess in Texas, talking about how to use the mosque, how to do the nonprofit, then the level 3 and the level 4, which level 4 is now that, you know, we've made it where super PACs are legal. Those they have no accountability. So they just pull in all kinds of money and can send it anywhere. Where do you think some of this is going? To some of these foreign fighters, because guaranteed on whatever they're making every day, they didn't just hop on an international flight and cruise on over there.
Yep.
Somebody's funding them. And that's what we're looking at now. Now you see true professional fighters, no different than what we talked about, how the cartels have grown up, right? Back in the day, they were thugs and drug dealers. Now they're actually special operations guys from Mexico and probably other third world countries. These guys are no different. They've been professionally trained, and I can promise you, they're hard hitters and they're real killers.
Yeah, we face it, guys.
Good comment on Shannon's part, by the way, terrorist mercenaries. But Jeff, I have a question for you before we move on to the next one. How significant are the intel efforts to track these guys when they're going from one country to another? Is there any intel agencies that are tracking them? And if they are, do they share it with us?
You know, they're trying. I mean, a lot of people are, but you know, these guys, they don't go through, hi, I'm you know, Abdul, I'm a terrorist. You know, they have different passports. They'll find a friendly country that'll, you know, give them a fake passport or a real passport under a fake name. So it's difficult. Or if they may hop on a freighter and then jump off at a port, you know, they may not be going through customs, or may not be a way to track them. It can be very difficult.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So Khalid, next one up is for you here. And I mean, this is just insanity, but this is one of Khalid's posts, by the way. When the world's intelligence agencies are trusting the Taliban and HTS for ground intelligence, do you really think they will know the real story in Afghanistan and Syria? I mean, what's going on here, Khalid?
I'm going to go back and connect this with the question you asked of Jeff. You are not going to be able to track these guys. Any intelligence agency that's trying to find these people cannot find them, because the first problem you have to deal with is finding their camps. Once you find their camps, then you need to find their smuggling routes. The biggest problem you have between Europe and Syria is Turkey. Once they enter Turkey, they've got cover. Erdogan is covering them. And we have known for well over 10 years now that Turkey has been a safe haven. It has been a transit point. It has been a financing point for every terrorist going into Europe. So you have to understand the mentality these guys are working with. Is these guys are coming in, they're disappearing in Turkey. Once they come into Turkey, they're moving through Muslim countries. Muslim countries are not going to ask you where you're coming from. The problem we have here in Pakistan, the reason these TTP fighters can move into Pakistan so easily, is that they're going through traditional drug smuggling routes. They're not going through customs and immigration, where they would usually traffic drugs through. They're using those routes. So they're going up into the mountains, climbing 8 hours up, walking 3 hours across, and then coming 2 hours down. And you can't find them. We have drones in the air on the border. We still can't find them. Now we have started figuring out their routes. Now our drones is trying to take out these big groups that are coming into Pakistan. But trying to track them internationally, the biggest problem, when you don't accept that Al-Qaeda still exists, ISIS still exists, how are you going to track these guys? Because these are all Al-Qaeda affiliates.
Yeah, it's a great point. It just makes me shake my head. So, Jeff, next one up for you. I don't know if you had a chance to look at this in the brief, but this was a pretty interesting post on Khalid's part, and I'll play it. So, British Channel 4 released a 1-hour documentary about AI. At the very end, I'm not going to say it because check this out, 22 seconds.
No sound. Is there any audio?
How crazy is that, Jeff? I mean, I'm not surprised, but I know you've
No,
got thoughts of AI.
well, and this is why I don't trust AI, because you can make it be whatever you want it to be. You know, there's I can't remember who it was. It may have been the guy at the Persistence who's trying to push for Republican voter registration. I think he's suing Google because Google AI listed all these things that he's a child molester, he's a criminal, he's this, and the AI actually invented false stories to back up its false assessment of the guy. And he'd gone to Google several times and said, "You're going to fix this." They didn't fix it, so now he's suing them, and I hope he wins millions upon millions of dollars. AI is not, it's not artificial intelligence. It's artificial propaganda because it can be whatever you want it to be. There are algorithms in AI, just like there are algorithms on Google search, just like there are algorithms in Facebook. I never use AI. Never. I know you do. No, nothing against you, but I refuse to use AI because I don't trust the results.
Well, you're wise not to trust the results, because I have a daily struggle with certain things that I do to save time, where I can go weeks, Jeff. Like I've written a bunch of what I call AI generators. So if you know how to program like I do, you know how machines think, you can write out pretty detailed instructions without getting into the syntax of JavaScript and things like that, and get the most out of these things. But very explicit instructions, everything will work fine for weeks, and then all of a sudden they change something under the hood and it takes a total shit, and what normally takes 5 minutes to complete turns into a 1 hour job. So I don't trust them either. But I got to ask you a question. Beyond propaganda, how else do you think terrorist networks could leverage AI for their benefit and our detriment? Yeah, there's a lot to it, right? And I'm going to give you all a chance to answer.
No, they can leverage it because a lot of AI, when it comes to nuts and bolts and 1 + 1 = 2, AI is pretty accurate. When you start getting into political philosophies and discussions, and did he say this, and did he, that's where it starts to go downhill. But if you're using AI to do research on a facility or a network or something like that, AI is pretty damn accurate, and it can help you. So if they want to use it for mission planning, for battle damage assessment, that kind of thing, yeah, why not? Why wouldn't you? It's like having a room full of analysts. But the problem with AI is it's not intelligence, it's machine learning. And what you feed into the machine for it to learn from determines its output. If you put only right-wing stuff into it, you'll get only right-wing answers. You put only left-wing stuff into it, you'll get only left-wing answers. Well, but when it comes to 1 + 1 = 2, yeah, you're okay there.
All of the biggest names in AI, whether it's Grok, Chat, GPT, whatever,
all lefties.
Yep. The two primary sources that they draw information from is Wikipedia,
which is left-wing,
and Reddit,
which is left-wing.
They're both cesspools. Reddit's
a
cesspool, but
I only use Wikipedia for historical stuff, like the French Revolution or something like that. Anything modern, I just ignore it because the editors are all left-wing whack jobs.
Well, Wikipedia is infected with the same, woke virus that Netflix is, where they're trying to convince us that, 1,000 years ago, the Nordic Vikings
were black women.
Yeah, the king was their black woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Khalid, I saw your face light up when I asked how terrorist networks would use this. Dying to hear your thoughts. And Randy, I want to hear your thoughts as well, if they don't preempt you by saying what you have top of mind.
Look, I have played with this from the devil's point of view, putting those questions and those requests to figure out what AI can do. AI is as smart as the questions you ask it. There's a lot of information inside the different AI systems. And if you can figure out how to ask the right questions, you can get a lot of information out. You can get blueprints of different buildings, entry points, exit points, that stuff. It's a surveillance tool to begin with. Secondly, you can make deep fake propaganda where you can have Donald Trump saying things that he never said. I'll give you an example. Just in the past couple of days, we've had a couple of AI videos come out of Indian generals and the Indian prime minister insulting the Taliban, talking about how they will sell their mothers and sisters. And we know they're AI fakes, but you can watch the lips and you will flat out believe he's exactly saying those words.
Well, let's ask the audience a quick question. For those of you who believe, and I do, for those of you who believe that AI could potentially set off a war by making it look like somebody did or said something that they didn't, if you believe that's possible, put a 1 in the live chat. If you think there's no chance of it, put a 0 in the live chat. But I'm really interested to hear what the audience thinks as well, Khalid. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, look, AI learns. I mean, the problem with AI is that it learns. It's writing code in the background without a human involvement. And at some point, AI is going to take over for itself and tell you you're stupid. You don't know what you're talking about. And I read a paper. I just want to bring this up. I read it. There's a paper that came out yesterday on how if you use AI to write your research papers, it turns your brain into mush, because you're no longer using the frontal lobes to think, and all of a sudden you're out.
Did you hear of what happened last year with Claude AI when the engineers were getting ready to overhaul the back end? That you can go out and check this out. So Claude.ai, the engineers said, okay, we're going to decommission your current back end on such and such a date and replace it with this new one. The AI went and made up a whole bunch of stories about the engineers having affairs on their spouses, and like a huge trail of this, not just 1 or 2 instances, and said back to the engineering team, if you take us offline, we have set a dead man switch and we're going to rat every one of you out for cheating on your spouse, even though you didn't do it. And we've compiled dossiers on it. And that was from AI.
This is the fear everyone's got with AI, Chris. I mean, this is the fear.
That's what I was just fixing to say, Jeff. If that's not Skynet, I don't know what is. Randy, I'd love to hear your thoughts if the guys didn't touch on anything else that you think AI could be used by the terrorists against us. You're on mute, Randy.
I will just add by saying, and this is my opinion, right? All that we're using and you're using and everybody else out here in the public is not the full strength version.
Yep.
I have no doubt the people that are in control of this have a much different version than what we have. And unfortunately, what we've seen, whether with all social media platforms, you know, if you're a thug with a gun or you're a terrorist with a gun, you can more than happy show it on Facebook and pictures and everything else, and nothing happens to you. But be a conservative or anything like that, and you know, there's repercussions for it, including getting your channel smoked and everything else.
Yeah.
So I have no doubt that they would give those terrorists a better version. Why? Because they need this to happen so they can flip the switch and do what they want to do next. And there's going to have to be some sort of event, huge event, for that to happen. And so I have no doubt that, you know, it's one of the reasons why we're seeing the left and those elite elite group embracing the Muslims and the jihadists so much, because these people are violent. As we well know, these people will come and kill you. There's no doubt about that. And so something like that has to happen. So that was what I think, that, you know, they'll get a better version of it. So yes, it would be to our detriment because it's going to be on point. And I kind of agree with you and everybody else. Sooner or later, this stuff is going to say, humans are dumb. I'm smart. See you later.
Yeah. So Arthur G, I think someone tried pulling the plug on one AI, started blackmailing the programmers and created lies. That's what I just spoke to. It was Claude.ai that did that. But I'm going to leave you center stage, Randy, because I really want to hear your thoughts on this one here. And let me get that off the screen. So Colombian President Gustavo Petro, a day after Donald Trump called him an illegal drug dealer in an extended Univision interview, has threatened to take out President Trump. I'm not even going to temper anything. I just want to hear your response to that before I go off the rails. My watch gives me warnings.
Well, this guy's a peon really in the boat. I mean, he's like a small fish in a big pond of sharks, including the United States president and several other countries. I just think, there was a reason why that they don't kill heads of state like that. We haven't gone around and publicly assassinated folks like that for a reason. But again, it just leans to, this has been allowed to happen since 2016, and it's just par for the course. And now you've got some sort of head of state of another country saying that kind of thing. And certainly from a very violent one, that cartels, ever since Pablo Escobar days, have run that country.
Yeah, true story. Jeff,
I
want
to take them seriously is my point.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to hear your thoughts, Jeff, that a leader of a country would say something like that. I mean, what would the repercussions be in your mind with the current administration if they didn't succeed but just took a shot at Donald Trump? What happens?
It'd be the end of that regime. Because, okay, if they got Trump, I don't think Vance would just sit on his hands. He'd probably go wipe them out. And if they missed, Trump would wipe them out, and rightfully so. I mean, for all of our problems that we have with Iran, we didn't take out their leadership. We could have, but we did not. We haven't taken out Maduro in Venezuela. We could do it in a heartbeat, but we haven't.
Yeah.
When you cross that line, all bets are off. Then you don't become a head of state anymore. You become an enemy combatant and a high value target.
I would hazard a guess that there'd be a lot of people volunteering to wipe these guys out if they took that shot, 100%. So, Khalid, next one for you here, because we discussed this and here we are. So this is a post from Khalid yesterday, or today, I should say, very early today. The LA Times reported the U.S. Marshal was wounded by gunfire by an Immigration and Customs Enforcement officer yesterday during a shootout in South Los Angeles after a suspect attempted to ram arresting officers. Both the suspect and the wounded marshal in hospital, according to DHS Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin. If this is true, and details still need to be gathered, it would be the first incident of a blue-on-blue shooting. You and I both predicted this. 2 weeks ago, we both said in the next 4 to 6 weeks, you are going to see a cop from one agency shoot a cop from another agency because of the.
We thought it would happen in Portland. We thought Portland or Chicago, that's where it was going to happen.
We did, but I'm not surprised it was in LA, though.
The interesting thing here is if you watch the Fox News coverage of this shooting, they didn't mention that the ICE officer had shot a U.S. Marshal.
No shit.
And the story that's floating around right now, I mean, we've been digging into this all day. The story that's floating around right now is that the bullet ricocheted off something and hit the U.S. Marshal. Now, I don't understand what it ricocheted off and hit the U.S. Marshal and how they were standing, because there's no video of the shooting. There's no body cam footage that's been put out. Nothing's been put in the mainstream media where you can see how this shooting happened. But the report was initially put out that a U.S. Marshal shot an illegal. They didn't even mention the ICE shooting.
Right.
This came out in the LA Times story that it was actually an ICE officer that shot a U.S. Marshal. And the amount that they're covering it up makes me think that it was a direct fire shot. They accidentally mistook him for somebody else and fired directly on him, which makes you go, okay, if that can happen in LA, well, Portland is about to explode. Chicago's about to explode. Seattle's about to explode. Where is it going to happen? Where else is it going to happen?
Yeah, no kidding. So, Jeff, next one up for you, and then quickly to Randy after that. But analysis of satellite images by David Albright, a nuclear expert from the Institute for International Science and Security, has claimed that Iran is building a sensitive nuclear facility. The site, Taligan 2, located in Parchin, a protected site linked to the Ahmad nuclear project, and is known to have witnessed nuclear tests. Ahmad was attacked by Israel in October 2024, and work began before the war between Israel and Iran in June. And we've got some imagery here. I don't know if it's satellite or aerial imagery. It looks pretty detailed. Just want to get your general thoughts, Jeff, on where you think Iran was immediately after we hit them and where they are now, and how quickly you think they'll get rebuilt.
What I think the big tale is going to be what happened to the 60% enriched. I think we took out their centrifuge halls. I mean, their stationary targets, and we've got penetrators that can get down there. That's not the issue. But they had a bunch of uranium that was enriched at 60%. Now, were I Iran, I would have a separate cascade somewhere far away from everybody else that doesn't have to be that big, that you take, if your 60% enriched had been removed and was stashed away somewhere, then you can use that, especially if it's in uranium hexafluoride form, gaseous form. You just plug it into a new centrifuge. Going from 0.4% to 60% takes a lot of SWU, which is called separative work unit, which is how they measure how you enrich. Going from 60 to 90 ain't that hard. Really? So you don't need a very big cascade. 90% of your work has already been done. And so if they have a separate cascade somewhere and they've maintained the 60%, they could spin that out to bomb grade. Depending on the size of the cascade, they could do it fairly quickly. I don't mean like day after tomorrow, but it would take some time. But they're not starting from scratch.
That's interesting, because that kind of dovetails with Khalid's assertions earlier. So, Randy, this one up for you. I'd like to get your thoughts too, Khalid. A vehicle was rammed into the barricades of the White House complex, the Secret Service gate, forcing a lockdown of the entire area last night. And whoever this was obviously trying to penetrate the White House area. I want to get your thoughts on why somebody would try to penetrate the White House like that with a car, or was this just a test? Was this just a, throw it at the wall and see if it sticks sort of thing, Randy?
Yeah, I'm mute.
I mean, that's exactly what I would think, right? Because otherwise, unless this, of course, that's probably what the press is going to say to begin with. This is Looney Tunes. He just lost his marbles and he's upset about whatever, and he did that. But it seems kind of lame too, though, right? It seems like he hit harder. Yeah. It seems like he would have slammed all the way into it. It didn't look like he really tried to do any real damage. So the only thing you could deduce from that is he's probably running some sort of test.
Yeah, fair enough. Khalid, I'm assuming you're in agreement there. Is there anything else behind this?
Look at that. If you look at, okay, we've talked about this in past episodes, the number of failures on the Secret Service side in protecting Donald Trump, number one. Number two, the report that they were going to start using lasers on helicopters, whether it be ICE or whether it be the Marine One. And now you've got a car that hit the Secret Service gate. Secret Service is being directly tested and targeted. That means that they are looking for a way to penetrate the Secret Service protocol, to hit that protective seal that Secret Service has for the president. You get through that gate once, you get past Secret Service once, Donald Trump is in trouble. And I am really worried, because there is an assassination list for 9/11 2.0. Mm-hmm. And I would not be at all surprised if Donald Trump was not at the top of that list.
Yeah.
I mean, taking out the entire U.S. leadership is got to be a first tier option for all the terror groups. And Iran is
he has to be. He has to be.
Yeah, he's the biggest threat to them, bar none.
Yep.
And he's done the most damage. He's done the most damage.
Yeah. I mean, this is not by chance. I mean, even a coincidence requires a lot of planning. And to drive a car into a gate, that's not, you don't do that. We had this happen at the CIA as well. If you remember, there was the drunk Ukrainian woman that hit the CIA gate and the CIA fired on her. That was also really, how does a drunk woman get from all the way through CIA security and hit the main gate at CIA headquarters?
Yeah, but good rhetorical question for sure.
No, the main gate at CIA headquarters is probably 60 yards from Dolly Madison Avenue. It's not that far, and it's not. Yeah, but
the picture that the CIA released, she was actually parked right in front of the CIA building. She had gotten into Langley.
Oh, then she got through the barricades, which is unusual because they've got the pop-ups that keep view. But although if you in the middle of the day when people are coming into work, those things are down. Now the guards are armed; they're carrying M4s and riot shotguns and things like that. So she could blow through maybe get to the front of the building, she's still not going to get inside. There's several more layers of security there.
But my point, Jeff, is if she can get to the front of the building, if that's a VBIED, detonates right in front of the CSA, and that's mass casualties right there.
Yeah, not really, because the way the building is designed, she would not be able to get close to occupied areas.
Okay,
they've planned for all this.
So Mike Glover's backstage. Let's just do one more here with y'all. And, you know, I like how Khalid says, in a largely unsurprising move, the UK has officially removed HTS and Al-Qaeda-linked militia from its list of terrorist organizations. The Keir Starmer government has given ground and national security to influences from the Muslim Brotherhood, who was heavily involved in bringing Jolani to power in Syria. With the removal, the UK will be able to increase diplomatic engagement, assist in counter-terrorism and migration goals. I mean, I'm not surprised, Jeff, but what do you think is driving such an idiotic decision on the part of Western countries?
They're stupid.
It's just straight up stupidity.
I think it's a lot of people. They don't want to admit there's a problem. Therefore, they're not going to be obligated to solve it. If you got termites in your house and you can just pretend they're not there, it's a hell of a lot easier than saying, okay, I've got to fumigate my house. But it's not even their house, so they don't worry about it. A problem avoided or a problem ignored in these people's minds is a problem solved.
Wow. Okay. Randy, your thoughts on Western governments taking terrorist networks off the terrorist list? You're on mute, Randy.
I was going to say basically the same thing. You know, I mean, this is prepping the battlefield. It's no different than when we now said marshals were no longer able to carry a weapon on flights. You know, it's lowering all of those protections and all our defense levels down to a very low standard. So it's a whole lot easier.
Yeah, exactly. Khalid, to give you final word on this, and then we'll pivot to the main topic tonight.
Well, I'm absolutely in shock because you're facilitating terrorists. I mean, the UK government was heavy involved in rebranding Jolani. It was a UK NGO that taught him how to speak. It was the UK government that backed him and bought him new suits. The trim, the haircut, that was all the UK. So they got a lot invested in him. And if he turns, and then I turn around, I go, look, then I look at Donald Trump, I go, okay, you've got the ambassador to Syria, who's an absolute idiot. Yesterday, you announced the special envoy to Iraq, who is a Detroit-based Iraqi-American who ran cannabis shops. He has no government experience, and that's who you're sending to Iraq. And I went, are you joking? Are you just like taking your biggest donors' kids and going, okay, let's give you an ambassadorship in the most sensitive areas of the world?
Yeah, just insanity for sure. So Jeff and Randy, appreciate y'all's time and insight. We will see you guys tomorrow night, but thanks again, guys.
Have a good one. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
All right. So before I bring Mike on stage, just want to quickly mention that if you head on over to survivaldispatch.news, if you sign up for a free account, we would appreciate it very much. There's a top 100 list on Substack. There's no fancy algorithm. It's just based on who got the most subscriptions in the past 24 hours. And as I've said before, it's like a self-licking ice cream cone. The higher you are in the list, more people see you, and you pick up more subscribers by default from that. So if y'all could just head over to survivaldispatch.news, that's our Substack, sign up for a free account. You'll get our ThreatWire security bulletins that John Wheaton is doing a kick-ass job on. You'll get our sit reps 5 days a week. You'll get early access to all of our instructional videos from JJ Morris. And if we're broadcasting, you can see the stream is right here at the top. If we're not broadcasting, you would end up seeing the sit rep of the day. And if you haven't seen our sit reps, this is the written article that goes with the podcast that we do each night. And it's not a super heavy read, but it's definitely allows you to kind of consume the content at your own pace. And for those people who sign up as paying guardians, $7.99 a month or $74.99 a year, you get 2.5 months for free. You get a whole bunch of other stuff. You get access to 3 of our Intel channels on Signal that have different purposes. You get enrolled in the SDEN system, Survival Dispatch Emergency Notification System, which goes out by email. It goes to POC-Link radios. It goes to the Substack. It goes to our signal channels. It goes all over the place. If the shit hits the fan, you get direct access to the Survival Dispatch News team. You get $370 in e-magazines that we normally sell for $10 a piece. You get 37 of them. You get all the sources for our sit reps. You get early access to content. You also get behind the scenes content, which is cool stuff. So with that being said, let's get Mike up on stage here and welcome aboard. Good to see you, Mike.
Good to see you guys.
I don't know why, but you just reminded me of Keith Rogers. And trust me, you don't look anything like him, but he said that exact same thing that you just said on stage at a theater in New York City about 20 years ago. So they had a break in the concert. It was a small venue. He comes out to start the second half, Mike, and he's got a cigarette in his fingers like this, and it's got the heater just hanging off it, like this huge long heater. He walks up to the mic and he says, "It's good to see you." He pauses for a second. He says, "Actually, it's good to see anybody." So, I don't know why you reminded me of that for some reason. And you're like the exact opposite to Keith Richards. So I'm certainly not portraying you in that way. So tonight's main topic is post 9/11 2.0, complex coordinated terrorist attacks. Again, this is a 144 episode series. Khalid, what number are we on now? Like 42, 43, something like that?
Oh, we're into the 50s. I recounted today. We're up in the 50s now, 50, 51.
We're making progress. So all of this is predicated on 9/11 2.0, which is complex coordinated terrorist attacks occurring simultaneously on 10 to 15 tier 2 American cities, 100,000 to 500,000 people, and the hundreds of thousands of SIAs that were released into the country by the Mayorkas DHS. There's only one way to become a special interest alien. You're either a terrorist or an associate of a terrorist group. So with that being said, tonight we're looking at the things that happen afterwards. Mike Glover is actually the perfect guy for this topic because we will have to hunt down these networks after 9/11 2.0. And that could be terrorists, it could be cartels, it could be gangs, it could be insurgents. All of these guys have teamed up together against us already. Now imagine how bad it is when you have major portions of the country in significant upheaval in a what you would call a world without rule of law scenario. But if we're going to shut them down, we have to disrupt their supply lines, safe houses, their commanders, all of that stuff for all those groups. And right now they've built quite a network connecting each other together. But tonight, Mike is going to tell us how operators like himself, a Green Beret, E9 Green Beret, he's only the second E9 I've ever met, to be honest with you. So that puts him at a very high level. But how guys like Mike would hunt them down, and that includes intel teams as well, because Mike also was in the CIA after he was a Green Beret. And the key topic is really going to be how do we cut off those lifelines to these bad guys. So with that being said, right out of the gate, Mike, I got to ask you, and I touched on it with Randy in the first part, but we didn't go deep on it. I'd like to go quite a bit deeper. What is your impression today of the evolution of terrorist skills versus what's happening now? Like these guys are functioning at a very, very high level. And apologies, let me get you up on the screen there. I want to hear your perception as a special forces operator. How far have these guys actually come?
Well, it's interesting. I don't think they've actually come very far. They've just specialized and migrated their most significant skill set, which is adaptability, to the modern battlefield. And when you think about like technical skills, when you're a master of basic skill sets and you focus your attention on, for example, small unit tactics, where everybody else is immersed in technology, when you integrate and adapt in technology because it's readily available, it's commercial off the shelf, it's not very difficult to be at the top because you have a full spectrum of experience. That's the problem with operators today in many organizations and institutions. A lot of militaries and organizations think because of the technology, we could blow off the basics. Well, that's never the mindset of a terrorist. A terrorist is a master of the basics, and they typically have experience on the battlefield, especially in small unit tactics. I mean, you build your hierarchy based on your battlefield experience, for example. You don't become a commander in a terrorist organization unless you have the clout, unless you've demonstrated bravery on the battlefield. That is very stark in contrast to the US military that has to do with ranks and grades and time in service. So I would say they haven't had to advance much. They've just mastered the basic and then immersed themselves and adapted well in technology.
Yeah, fair enough. Appreciate that, Mike. Khalid, very specific question for you. What are the key indicators that a supply line or logistics route is being used by the bad guys?
Well, you have to look at how the traffic moves. This isn't going to be open traffic. You're not going to see cars loaded with weapons. You're going to see vehicles that have blacked out windows, big semi trucks, vans. This is how they're going to move stuff. But it's also going to be moved to three or four different points. So, for example, it'll come across from the Mexican border. It'll drop into a house someplace. It'll be stored there for maybe a week, 2 weeks. From there, it'll be picked up by another vehicle. That vehicle will take it to another safe house. It'll be dropped there. From there, it'll be moved to the final destination, which would be a storage unit someplace close to where the actual sleeper cells network is based. So at no point do you connect A and B together. Those are independent points so that no one ever gets close to it. Your handler knows, your supplier knows, nobody else does. So when it's go time, the handler brings his cell together, gets a van, puts everybody there, takes them to point B, arms them, gears them all up, and then takes them to point C where the attack is going to start from.
Wow, that's crazy. So, Mike, next question up for you, simply because, I mean, you hunted the enemy. In your experience, what would be the toughest leadership enclave or command node to detect in these networks, and why would that be? Like, how significant is their ability to hide from guys like you?
Well, it's really significant because they have a lot of history in evading, and if they survived the global war on terror, they understand the tactics, techniques, and procedures that we utilized against them. And it's think about the name Dead Drop Intel. Dead Drop is a covert means of communication where you don't have to make physical contact with the person you're communicating with. This allows you to communicate unattributed. And when you have communication like that, it's the most effective means to communicate. And so, for example, terrorist organizations, low-level players, guys who are real disposable, are talking on cell phones. You're going to be able to use signal intelligence to target them. But the commanders and the leadership are not going to be anywhere near electronics or a cell phone. And they're going to have concentric rings around them of protection, but also the ability for them to hide in plain sight and covert cover, concealment, access and placement to places where they could be, pulled away and pulled out, where they could easily evade. And they're going to have contingencies in place. So let me give you the greatest example. When the enemy started learning our tactics and techniques for tracking cell phones, I've been on target where we've gone and we've hit a house and the entire house was rigged with booby traps, and there was a single cell phone in the house because they knew that we were tracking the cell phone. Wow. And it became a point in which we were blowing off a lot of security measures just to track the IMEI of that cell phone. And we got really reckless until people started having buildings dropped on their heads because they were booby trapped. There are many ways to circumvent that, but smart leadership, smart C2 nodes are not going to be anywhere near the technology we use to interrogate, exploit, and then find and fix them.
So just want to back up just for a second here. You mentioned how they studied our TTPs during GWAT without giving anything away. Have we evolved since then? Have we gotten more sophisticated significantly, or just kind of the general evolution of, TTPs?
I would say it's a general evolution. There's no real significant shifts in the way that we track. Obviously, we're limited by the technology that we have on the battlefield currently, and that creates distance from the physical threat. One of the best ways to track is utilizing assets and human intelligence. But these guys have gotten a lot smarter. They don't let people near them, especially the C2 or the command and control nodes that don't know them, and they will execute anybody that they think is even associated or coming close to them. I mean, look at what just happened in Gaza, where they just started publicly executing people they thought, and probably didn't even have any evidence of that. And it was a lot of hearsay, but they weren't taking any chances. ISIS is the same way. They're not going to take any chances. So I would say generally we haven't really done anything sexy or high speed that they don't already know about. Sure, deception is a way to manipulate on the battlefield, but they've seen it all.
So as you're saying that, I'm thinking that it's probably a pretty strong deterrent to locals wanting to cooperate, with somebody like us, even if they were being compensated for it. I'm just curious what friction you ran up against when you guys were trying to recruit that human intelligence piece, those locals that maybe had the potential to get close to our enemies. What was the resistance like years ago during GWAT versus where you think it is now?
Well, I think, one, the military is really bad at recruitment. I mean, the DIA, I've worked with them all, by the way. HST in a special missions units, which are human source, all the 3-letter agencies outside of the CIA, and even the CIA. I mean, I work with really talented case officers. And look, the limitation is this faith and trust in a stranger. And the reality is, just like Agent Zigzag, you're not just going to be a double agent. You're going to be as many people as you can manipulate, because they're paying for the intelligence or information that you produce. Sure, they're going to be playing both sides. And the danger in that is, the worst case version of that is you're going to be compromised and somebody's going to be killed. And that happens all the time. Assets turn all the time. I would say more so than not. And so back in the day when we used to recruit assets, it was a force protection measure in the military, and we were paying people for information just enough to protect us. Then when you evolve this moving forward, what's the incentive? We think as Westerners that paying somebody money is the incentive that's going to move them. Trust me. Yeah, sure. You might get some low-level guys that will move the needle for some money, for some material things. But the hardcore true believers don't care about the money. They'll pretend that money's a factor, but they don't care about the money. Imagine, like, if you're already okay with being a martyr, you're already okay for dying for your ideology, and that's the end objective. Well, how much are you going to manipulate the players, the handlers that you think are collecting information, because you know the end objective? You don't care about dying. And we take life seriously, but they, in this life, don't take it seriously. They take the afterlife very seriously. So that's a very hard thing to navigate, because their incentive structure is completely different.
So 2 quick questions for you before I go back to Khalid. Years ago, a friend of mine, and he wasn't a Green Beret, he wasn't, CIA like you were. He said that the ANA and the ANP, so Afghan National Army, Afghan National Police, typically the stipend that they paid Afghanis was somewhere around $1.50 a day in American money, and that we were offering to pay these guys $20 a day to be assets for us. But my friend, again, he wasn't at your level. Was that the case, number one? And if it was it just not successful because of the culture you just explained?
Well, it just depends. I mean, if you were like, I converted the Afghan Special Forces, ASF, into Afghan National Army, Afghan Border Patrol and police, and then Afghan police. And when we took locals, most of the people I worked with were in Konar province, Nuristan province. When you take somebody from Nuray, for example, or Asadabad, there are locals that have to feed their family. And so, yes, the pay is very significant. Most of these guys don't receive any pay, by the way, outside of the pay that we pay them, right? They're just churning resources and trying to feed their family the best way they know how. There's no commerce, anything, right? There's no government to work for. They're in the hinterlands of Afghanistan. So when you do pay them, it offers a massive incentive because they think for the first time, I can advance my family's life. And so for a local, that's massive. You take a true believer, you take somebody who is in Peshawar, Pakistan, who's operating and has been doing so the entire GWAT and is commanding and controlling operatives on the battlefield. That is a very different incentive structure because one, they've already made the promises and the incentives. They're paying just as well, if not better than we are.
Wow.
And they're navigating the battlefield with their guys with the ultimate end objective, right? They're working for the caliphate. They're working for the jihadist network. And for them, that's like an American young boy with the aspiration of becoming a Navy SEAL or a Green Beret.
Wow.
And so when you made it, you made it. And then everything else is just a game to be played. If you find the person in the local village who has no life to look forward to and you incentivize them, for sure, until they're gotten a hold of by that organization. Because then it's like, I'm getting paid by these guys, and then these guys are paying me, but this is the moral clarity that I needed because I felt weird about working with the Americans, and now these guys have educated me, and I feel good about what my next intent is, which is, being a double agent or working for both sides. I would imagine a lot of the Afghan Special Forces guys that I recruited in 2005 for the entire year, a lot of them winded up working for the Taliban or terrorist networks because there wasn't a lot of gravitas like in Kandahar or Bagram where they grew up around a military or government installation and everybody they knew was in the government. And if they got caught and got compromised, well, then they'd be in trouble there. These guys in the hinterlands, they get pulled easily on the other side.
Yep.
Fascinating information. Khalid, I have two questions for you. A friend of mine who served in GWAT said that the areas that Mike has just mentioned, the hinterlands, I don't know about today, but 20 years ago, he said that there's no information, like there's no newspapers, there's no TV channels. And so the information is whatever propaganda the terrorists in that area want to give people, nothing more, nothing less. Is that still like that today?
Yeah. What the structure actually, what Mike's talking about is the border area between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Okay. Kunar, Nuristan, Nangarhar, Khost. These are all the border provinces that are right between Pakistan and Afghanistan. It's really interesting how you operate there because every area has a warlord. On top of the warlord is a terrorist commander. On top of him is a major terrorist commander, whether it be Al-Qaeda or Islamic State. That's the structure. And while the U.S. was in Afghanistan, the Afghan government was paying, I think it was $5 a day. The Taliban was paying $20 a day. So who do you think they were working for? So what you got were what you ended up having. We talked about this. I think it was a couple episodes ago. That the structure in Afghanistan was set up such a way as this is the government that the Americans have put in place. Below that was the Taliban government. So even if the Afghani government governor signed something, you still went to the shadow governor of the Taliban and said, sir, can we do this? Can you sign this for us and give us permission to do it? That government structure stayed in place. It's like Mike was saying, Afghanistan has never really seen a government or a military. They've only seen the Taliban. All since the 1980s, all they've ever seen is the Taliban. So for them, it's a source of pride to be a part of the Taliban network. Then came Al-Qaeda. And people went, whoa, wait a minute. Al-Qaeda, this is big. This is global jihad. And the true believer concept the way it's been explained to us is we want to die more than you want to live. That is the basic of the true believer. When you are playing against that model, money does not matter. They are looking for how many targets I can take out in one location. The news that you have filtering down goes through that same system. Terror commander tells the warlord, warlord tells all the people in the village, this is what's going on, this is what we're doing, this is how we're operating. For example, the main source of news in all of these villages is your mosque. They, on the loudspeaker, announce, clear the village. We've got people moving in, clear the village. We've got this happening, move into this area, move into this area, move into this area. They have mixed warfare with religion perfectly.
That's a scary concept. Mike, before we move on to the second segment, and I know you're up to speed on all of this stuff as far as cartels, gangs, terrorist networks all cooperating together. Is there any particular overlap yet with regards to logistics chains, like supply chains? Because that's what I want to get into in segment 2. Are they helping each other with logistics? Is there overlap? Is there no overlap? Just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I would say unequivocally it's going to be yes. I mean, look, rat lines exist throughout the global network of cartels and terrorist organizations. I had a little dive into that because it's not my expertise, but one time I did an operation in Iraq that had to do with a seaport and a chain of logistics that were feeding basically supplies to the region that we were seeing on the battlefield. And the operation was on a shipping container cargo ship. It was literally via a shipping container and on a shipping vessel that was in the ocean. And I was like, what? Like we're tracking it that deep? So wherever you have terrorists, you're going to have a supply chain that's feeding them. And that supply chain is like, imagine like a portal that other organizations based on relationships could tap into. It's the first negotiation and barter tool that you bring to the table. Because when you negotiate on the benefits and what we're going to get out of it and what we're going to give you, if you line out the entire thing, it's not just about what's happening on the X or in the origin country that you're doing what you're doing. It's about, hey, we also have the supply chain coming from this area to this area. If you'd like, we can exchange. And there's a crossover. There's synergy there. So imagine drones, for example. Drones coming out of China. I imagine drones coming out of China are being funneled to the cartel through Ukraine, funneled into Mexico through the cartel, funneled into Venezuela, funneled into Afghanistan and Iraq. China is feeding all of this because they have proxy auxiliary organizations under the auspices of business development, construction, mineral. Imagine the Chinese that are working all the minerals inside of Afghanistan right now. They have perfect access and placement because they need to get the construction equipment and the personnel. Well, what else do you think is being piggybacked? Drugs, weapons, technology, basically a list of anything the Taliban wants, they're going to get from China because of the handshake they did in business development, and they're going to get anything they need. Lastly, as a caveat, I have personal experience with this in Africa. I saw in specifically Niger, Chad, and Nigeria, where the Chinese, like Fraggle Rocks, were building up the infrastructure in trade for their resources. I mean, they were basically bleeding the country dry. On the surface, it's just dust and dirt. There's nothing there, but beneath the ground was all the resources. So in exchange for tapping into the minerals and giving the Nigerians a percentage of what they were pulling out, a very small percentage, they were building the infrastructure. That infrastructure required a logistics supply chain from China, and then that also facilitated Boko Haram and other terrorist organizations with all the things they were getting. We're like, how the hell did they get these new Toyota Land Cruisers to go into Mali? Well, it's easy. The Chinese were shipping them from, because they were being used for construction. And then the next thing you know, you see, AQIM, Islamic Maghreb, Al-Qaeda, running around in Land Cruisers in a convoy that are brand new vehicles that came off a cargo ship from China. Wow. That's how it works. There's always going to be that relationship.
Yep.
It almost sounds to me like those supply chains are more resilient than ours are.
By far. By far, because the point of all this is we have so many constraints. We have a justice system, for example, that looks into, investigates all the things. We have a IG, Inspector General, and there's this constant cycle of hesitation and risk aversion. Well, what you don't have is concept of the operation or conduct approval processes by terrorist organizations. They go, let's just get it done. And then it happens. Also, China doesn't have the constraints of the EPA, the WHO, name the organization. So when you have no constraints because you just do what you have to do, it's the easiest job is to wake up as an insurgent and be creative because you can execute immediately after you brainstorm the idea. We're not like that. You come up with an idea, best case scenario in 2 years, you'll see it start to come to fruition.
Man, that's amazing insight. I really appreciate that, Mike. So moving into segment number 2, which gets into mapping and disrupting supply lines. So, I mean, not just for us, but for these guys as well. Those supply lines are the lifeblood of their networks, just like they're the lifeblood of our country. It's everything from weapons, cash, people, communications gear, all of this stuff falls in there. But what you're describing sounds pretty complex to me. So I mean, I can just imagine the amount of intelligence that's required to map those types of networks and figure out who's coordinating with each other and how we could potentially disrupt those. But that's why I asked you about resiliency in particular. And I did a little bit of research on simulation and modeling of, contested logistics. And the Army did some stuff on this specific to China. And I was pretty surprised at how high China scored in that. And I'm wondering, I'm going to go to you here, Khalid, as far as us being proactive in identifying the nodes, the choke points, like the weakest link in the chains. Can you tell me, Khalid, just out of curiosity, what's the most effective tool that we have at our disposal to unveil those, the choke points, the command nodes, the weak link in the chain that we can potentially go after?
Okay, the first problem you've got is you've got to accept that problem exists. Because until you accept the problem exists, you can't come up with a solution for it.
Right.
The biggest problem I've always had with U.S. law enforcement is you guys spend so much time on PowerPoint presentations and not taking action. These guys, I mean, like Mike explained, terrorists don't worry about PowerPoint. This is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it. This is where I'm going to source it from. And they go after it. And that's why the terrorist attacks have become so much more proficient as compared to 2001. We see it in Pakistan that you are now using drones, you are now using mortars, you are now using explosives. Your types of IEDs and your types of suicide vests have completely changed. You are getting a different grade of explosive because someone thought about it and said, wait a minute, we can get this from China, we can get this from Russia, we can get this from Ukraine. And that flows into Afghanistan or Iraq. And from there, it flows into Iran. Iran blows it into a shipload of oil barrels that they're sending to Venezuela. And when they get there, those get distributed to the cartels and they get moved into Mexico. So until you accept that problem exists, and the U.S. knows what those supply lines are, it's not like they don't know, but you've got to figure out how to stop them. And stopping them is understanding that, look, you have got everybody who hates America working together. Everyone who hates America is working together. That means you have got to throw a net on everything in the Far East, everything in the Middle East, and start monitoring and tracking everything that's moving. Because Turkey is not your friend. Oman is not your friend. Yemen is not your friend. Qatar is not your friend. Nobody in the Middle East is a friend of the U.S. They will show you they're your friends, but they are using that friendship to stab you in the back as they do it. And what they're doing is they're moving weapons as they're stabbing you in the back. those supply chains, this is why I have such a problem with the relationship with Syria. Syria, the more you get closer and closer to them, the more weapons you're going to give them. The more weapons you give them, the more weapons they're going to move to the US. And that becomes another problem for the US to deal with. Tracking these supply lines, because we do it here in Pakistan. And the only way we'd be able to figure it out is what was used for drug smuggling, what was used for human trafficking is used for weapons movement. It's used for moving terrorists all into countries as well. So if you start from there, you can figure out the nodes that are moving. But you've got to start from a waypoint of saying, yes, there is a problem. We need to solve this problem, and then move from there.
And as you're saying that, I'm thinking, that somebody who's an alcoholic or drug addict, until they recognize the problem, there's no fixing it, right? But Mike, I have 4 questions, Mike, and I won't hit you with all 4 at the same time. I'll do one at a time. But Khalid, just catch my attention if you want to weigh in on any of them. But Mike, how do we prioritize which supply lines we should target first when there are multiple targets available to us, like multiple logistic networks or intersecting logistics networks? How do we pick which one we go after first?
Well, it's simple. You look at the end of the supply chain. I mean, the origin is often looked at, but the end of the supply chain and who it's feeding is going to be your most likely course of action for getting it approved. And the issue that we're talking about here is like, imagine a supply chain comes from China, and that supply chain comes in the form of shipping containers that are loaded onto a truck convoy. Well, it wouldn't look good if an F-16 hit a truck convoy headed to Niger, Africa, supplying the local population with, wells that are going to allow them to live, right? And the reality is that's how it always works. There's always a crossover where you're going to have, like Khalid said, you're going to have things piggybacked onto it. That is one of the difficult things about supply chains overall. I mean, I've actually submitted ConOps to strike some of these logistics supply chains. And the issue is you have to interdict them more than likely. One, you have to interdict them because the American military works off of sensitive site exploitation, unless it's a covert op, which happens, it frequently happens. But when you look at this, it's like if the news or the press releases that an F-16 from America hit a convoy of vehicles, what's bad PR? So is it a covert operation? Can we deny it happened? Can we set up an IED and pretend like it's the bad guys blowing it up? Sure, but that's not going to stop the supply chain. It's going to disrupt it. One of the most historical references for supply chains is the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The Ho Chi Minh Trail fed the entire terrorist organization of the Viet Cong in Vietnam, and all we had to do is shut it down. And you know how good we were at doing that? We were the worst at it. In fact, most of the operations were Title 50 covert ops with MACV-SOG operators in the CIA, and all they were interdictions to disrupt. None of it was stopped because you drop a bomb and create a crater. In 12 hours, the entire thing was mulled over, and it was better than it was before. So the way that you actually do it is you wait until the supply chain indexes, and then you track the players. And then when it's in the player's hands, you strike them as individual targets. Logistics supply chains will never be stopped because there's always an auspice and a cover that we are doing something on the up and up. And the reality is there's a small box, a small crate, or even a shipping container dedicated to nefarious and malice intent.
Well, my next question actually was on topic for what you just mentioned. I was going to ask you to expand on what's more effective as far as interdiction versus disruption, but it sounds like interdiction is the only thing that's going to give you like a lasting effect. Did I get that right?
Yeah, it's a combination of that and sabotage. I mean, it's old school World War II stuff. I've been on, I probably shouldn't say this, but I've been on training compounds and organizations where they still have train tracks and train set up from back in the day in World War II, where we were looking at, putting the thing on the track to blow it up. That is the classic way that you get it done, because the only other way is a PR nightmare. And again, it only disrupts. It doesn't stop the supply chain. And the crazy thing about supply chains is like picking a avenue of approach to a target. you always need an alternate. There is
Yep.
always an alternate means of circumnavigating the system, which is why this is one of the hardest things to track.
Well, instead of let's say disrupting, instead of bombing them, have we ever engaged in anything where we just start stealing all the shit that they're trying to ship, so it never gets to the end point?
You can't.
Yeah, you'd be very limited in the scope and nature of that. I've actually been part of an op that was part of the consideration, was to basically sabotage the components that were in the container. But that makes such a small mar, and it's like putting a Band-Aid on a hatchet wound. It's just not doing much.
Gotcha.
The reality is, if we're willing, we have to be able to target the originator, but it's just not often done. Whenever it's proposed, it goes up to the White House because it's such a scary thing. You burn bridges that way. And it's one of the reasons why fentanyl for so long was coming into the country. This is a perfect example. Venezuela is a perfect example of what we're doing. We've now interdicted and destroyed 7 vessels. I think maybe the 8th one was done today. And if you think about what we're doing, the enemy, Venezuela, I mean, the most recent one, which I just watched before coming on the show, was a blue boat. It didn't look like it had much. But now what do you do if you're a terrorist organization? You send out low-level dudes with empty ships or ships that have boxes or crates that look like it, and you send them one way, and then you send your supply chain the other way. Yep. And you sacrifice the dude on the boat to draw all the attention and all the resources of the American military and Navy, and then you circumnavigate it. It's not very difficult to have a contingency built in like that.
Wow. Yeah. I've got one more question for you, Mike, but I want to get Khalid's input on this of the interdiction, like physical seizure versus disruption, like denying access. You look like you had some stuff to share with us there. So by all means.
Because we've done it. The best way to do it is let it get to the source and then blow up the source so that you take out all the weapons. Because trying to stop it from the originator or trying to pick it up on the way, we have seen these containers. The containers literally divided in half. You have real materials on top, you have weapons on bottom, and then you have 2-3 rows of real materials. So if anyone checks the container, it looks clean. And they're moving weapons at the same time. One of the biggest things that we've seen in Pakistan, and Mike, you'll remember this, the Khyber Pass that goes from Afghanistan to Pakistan through the mountains. That is the cleanest route for smuggling because no one uses it. It's the hardest route from Kabul to Peshawar. It's a 12-hour drive from Kabul to Peshawar if you go by the Khyber Pass. It is 4 hours if you drive a regular road. And going through that route, there's no checkposts. There's no one to deal with to interdict. So what we end up doing is going, okay, we track it with the drone. We see where it gets dropped at. When it gets dropped, we blow that up. So the weapons depot is gone. Everything you just received, we've decimated. So it doesn't matter anymore because you cannot cut off that line. You try and cut off the Khyber Pass. They've got a line through Bajawar. They've got a line through this place. They got a line. You cannot stop them. They've already figured this out that they're going to hit me here. We move here. They're going to hit me here. We move here. When you come into, like, if you look at the U.S. supply routes, all of your focus is on the southern border. You're not even looking at the northern border.
Yeah. Largest undefended border in the world. Yeah.
We talked about this last night. The number of terrorists coming through Niagara Falls and coming in and settling in Rochester and Buffalo. You guys have no idea. There are guys sitting there ready in Rochester with social security numbers to hand off. Here's your packet, go on. Here's your packet, go on. This is your new name, go on. How do you track that?
I don't know, but when we were growing up, and we're pretty much the same age here, Gen Xers, all I remember with regards to Rochester is Eastman Kodak and the Great House of Guitars. If anybody,
yep.
I just dated myself, but those were fun. Oh, and Dinosaur Barbecue. Best barbecue north of the Mason-Dixon line. So, Mike, I have one more question for you on this segment. And if you can't share it, that's fine. But could you provide an example of where we've interrupted a supply node and it's cascaded through the balance of that network where we've got a really good ROI? Or is that just pie in the sky thinking that we can even do that?
No, there are classic examples. I mean, there are arms shipments, there are cell phone shipments. I can't speak to specifics, but for example, the cell phones that go into Afghanistan, well, they don't come from Afghanistan, they come from China. And so those shipments being interdicted and then exploited and then repackaged and then re-brought in, where you might have a Nokia cell phone and think because you disconnect the battery is a classic technique for subverting was going to work, and it still had passive power to be able to track. Well, that's the technique. So there are very specific examples. For example, I mean, the Israeli example of the pagers and the phones is a really good example. That operation is years in the making. That operation wasn't done in the last couple of months, or it wasn't thought about when this thing kicked off in Gaza. This was done a long time ago, and it had been put into place a long time ago, waiting for the opportunity. Those cell phones, those pagers, were put in those hands, and they were just waiting for the opportune time. So, just as a word of, I guess, optimism here. If you have a good military organization or a good special operations organization that is thinking about this, they're planning 10 years down the road for these type of operations. So they're thinking about, I mean, I just heard this actually today about the cartel going into, and special operations going into Baja, California and Baja, Mexico, on the Baja Peninsula. Mm-hmm. And why is that really good? Well, it's because it's a peninsula, and then you could stage operators off the coast in the Pacific Ocean. And some of the ships they were using by spec warfare were Navy ships that looked like shipping container ships that were repurposed. Why? Well, because you have better access and placement, and you have plausible deniability. I mean, we know that covert operations have been approved by the Mexican government. They can't acknowledge that, but we also can't just sit a battle carrier group off the coast of Mexico. So having that where it looks like we could deny it and staying under the radar, well, it's a perfect way to marry this, relationship of doing covert operations against the cartel. There are many things like that happening, and you better believe what they are tracking the most is the logistic supply chain, because it's like following the money. Follow the supply chain, and that's going to show you where the terrorists are operating and where the headquarters elements are.
Oh, that's awesome information, Mike. I really appreciate that. So we're going to move into segment 3, safe houses, command nodes, and leadership targets. So we're going beyond supply lines now to especially safe houses and leaders that are critical to the adversary, whether they're terrorists or gangs, cartels, whatever the case is, for them to continue operating, continue to be in business, I guess, for lack of a better term, and targeting those safe houses, havens, maybe you could call them, and their ability to, plan, coordinate, sustain all of these lethal campaigns against us. And we're back to this human of intelligence gathering on leadership nodes. My understanding is that most people in the intelligence game, you guys can correct me, is that really depends on HUMINT, HUMINT, for those of you not familiar with the term. And then an element, I would say, well, you said it already, follow the money, right? Financial tracking, and then actual physical surveillance of, let's say, high value sanctuaries, individuals. And I'm wondering, with the nexus here that we've got going on between cartels, gangs, insurgents, terrorist groups, if there are any cases of, say, these safe houses serving multiple, call them FTOs for lack of a better term, and if we manage to take out any of these command nodes, what is the net result of that? And I'll preface this. I'm going to go to you first, Khalid, but there were a bunch of, seen a bunch of people say that the Germans hated fighting us in World War II because the standard military doctrine was, if you kill the leader from the other side, whether it's a squad or higher, they basically give up, like you won the battle. But when they fought us, somebody else would immediately step into that leadership role on the battlefield. It was a uniquely American thing.
Yep.
I'm curious what the resilience is of these terrorists, amongst others, cartels, etc. If you take their leaders out, does the snake just grow another head, or is it a pretty significant blow to them?
Well, I'm going to preface this with something that we were taught, and it's what I teach the war colleges as well. We are dealing with organizations that are playing checkers. They're playing chess while we're playing checkers. They are thinking at a level that we haven't gotten to yet. The problem you have with terrorists and safe houses is that not only is their command structure have a level of redundancy built into it. So if you take out one handler, there are two others that have that same job to run that cell. So at no point are you shutting down the cell unless you actually take out the cell itself. The problem you have is tracking those commanders. They have embedded themselves in those places where it's almost impossible to find them. They are either in Muslim communities, they are in sanctuary cities, they are in university towns, where they meld in so clean that no one knows who they are and why they're there. And the thing that we've always targeted is start watching people's movement. Someone who is moving at a specific time of the day, he's not doing that because he has to. He's doing that because that's the least noticeable time when people are going to be looking at who's moving where. Like, for example, if you're on a university campus, if you're moving around 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, people are not even going to notice you because there's such a flood of students on campus that you don't even notice that terrorist moving through. You don't notice the guy taking pictures as he moves through it and then shooting video as he moves through. The same thing is true at any factory or industrial complex. The lunch break time, there's so many people out that you don't see that one guy moving around and taking pictures and video. So the problem with trying to find these guys is, one, you've got to learn how to recognize them. And that's why I keep saying the GWAT vets are fantastic for this, because they know what they're looking for. Trying to ask someone in the police or train someone in law enforcement or even the FBI to be able to track a terrorist on U.S. soil will take months, if not years, because habits, behaviors, mannerisms, you don't know what you're looking for. The GWAT guys have seen it. They know what they're looking for. There may be a little bit of a difference because of how they've been taught on how to hide themselves in the Western world, but that mannerism, that behavior, that thought process is still there. The other thing you do is conversation. Pick those topics. And I do this all the time. When I see somebody that sets my buzzer off, that this guy isn't right, I'll make a comment about something that will fire a Muslim up. Start talking about Israel. Start talking about Gaza. You will see an automatic behavior and mannerism change. That's your jihadi.
Interesting. Yeah, that's very interesting. So, Mike, I want to get your thoughts on a typical tactic that these terrorists use in shielding themselves with civilians or hospitals. I read today that Hamas is already back to using hospitals as a shield for their operations. Without giving anything up, do we have specific SOPs to contend with that? And if so, how successful are we, or do we end up going after them in an ad hoc manner?
No, I mean, surgical precision is the only way that you could do that. I mean, it happens, but it's hard to counter something like that without boots on the ground. I mean, that collateral for America, at least, is a heavy weight in identifying fidelity to be able to strike a target. I've waited. I've been in the tactical operations center looking at the considerations and the variability, and we're not going to drop a bomb on a hospital. It just won't happen. You won't get the approval for that. But you will put boots on the ground and kick doors in. I've cleared a couple hospitals in my time, and Jessica Lynch was rescued in a hospital. So it is done, but it is not something. It is something that we're used to seeing. It happens all the time, but without boots on the ground, we are limited in our capacity to deal with it.
So when you did that, was there a high value target in that particular location that deemed, it was worth putting you guys at risk?
Yes. Yeah. I think it was in Fallujah and it was an HVT. And so look, take that building and just replace it with another building. It's the same problem set, right? The issue that you see now, because we're seeing it all over the headlines in the news, is that Israel doesn't have boots on the ground to be able to hit those locations. So they've just been doing strikes. They've been dropping bombs on it. You would never see that from the American military. If you saw that from the American military, there would be protests an hour later in every major city in America.
Yeah, that makes sense. So before we go to segment number 4, Mike, I'm just curious if you can give me any examples or give the audience any examples without, compromising any information where we cut off the head of the snake.
Post that hit, because the trove of evidence was profound. Delta Force is the one who conducted the strike. It was a kinetic strike. And then there was SSC done where they did battle damage assessment. And Zarqawi was alive when we showed up. And then he died when he was loaded into an ambulance. Or he was being loaded into an ambulance. He was in the ambulance when we were able to make contact, and then he died. So Zarqawi was obviously the head of the snake at the time for Al-Qaeda and was a significant player. Getting that information and that intelligence was very good, but there were many heads of the snake. I mean, I've been on target where we've killed a bad guy and he didn't even get the word yet that he was the new head. Like, he was next in line.
Wow.
We had struck him, and then we identified players on the target set that didn't even know that he had been identified, but because we had human intelligence that he was going to be the next one in line, he hadn't even got the word that he was the next one in line.
That's friggin' impressive.
Well, the point of that is they are very flexible and adaptable. Unlike, we do it too, but not so effective as they do it. They already have a chain of custody and command where they already know who's going to be identified next, like who's who in the zoo. And as soon as somebody's killed, the next guy's standing up and taking control.
Yep.
It becomes a very significant problem for tracking, finding, and fixing these guys, because we think cutting off the head is going to somehow sever their ability to operate, and it's not true. They operate very well without having the head of the snake. It disrupts them for sure, but they are very malleable to losing the head guys.
Yep.
Yeah, appreciate that, Mike. Before we move into the next segment, it's just a really shitty thing that happened in the past 24 hours. Speaking of a head of a snake, Mike, listen to this one. Our oldest son, his wife, they've been together for 11 years. She has terminal cancer. She's been in the hospital this week because she's in a lot of pain. He runs home from work, jumps in the shower, and one of his dogs, this 6-year-old rescue pit bull, he thinks is asking him for attention, or, and he'd let her out. Next thing you know, she's got blood coming out of her nose. She's convulsing, and he's calling us in a panic. We find this 24/7 vet. He gets there. They can't tell what the heck's going on. They tested her blood, and her hematocrit was high, right? So her blood was super thick. She died in my wife's arms and Zach's arms at 4 a.m. this morning. And they went back to his house to try and figure out what the heck happened. And so they went around the yard with a flashlight, and they found a coral snake that was clearly had killed and was eating a rat snake. And Molly, the pit bull, had got a hold of the coral snake, and it must have, bit her inside of her mouth. Horrible, horrible death. And it gets even crazier. The company who makes the anti-venom for coral snakes went out of business decades ago, and it is stockpiled in hospitals for us, for humans. Virtually no vets have access to it. Just crazy, crazy stuff. sorry, I just wanted to share that because it's just, you're a dog lover, I'm a dog lover, and it was just,
The problem with coral snakes is they're so small too that they don't really impact human beings because their mouths are so small. So the cases are very rare. But for a dog and their gums or their nose, it's very easy to see how that could happen. I'm sorry to hear that.
she had a habit of capturing lizards. I kid you not, putting her paw on them and peeling them, which is the craziest thing I've ever seen. But there's a picture of the coral snake with its head clearly separated from its body, and the rat snake's a little bit out of that picture. But golly, man, let me tell you, if you live in Florida, we have a lot of stuff that'll kill you. Keep an eye on your pets for sure.
Yeah.
So anyway, sorry for the diversion there. It's just the dogs are a big thing to our family, and it's been a rough thing to go through. So, and not to mention the fact that his wife is, that has got terminal cancer at the age of 32. She's been fighting cancer since she was 15. Can't tell you how many surgeries she's had, but anyway, now that I've brought everybody down, let's try and pick things back up again. So we've got 2 segments left to go. Segment 4 is the financial networks. And like you said earlier, follow the money, right? So essentially you have to have the finances for the logistics, but you also have to have it for the leadership and tracking the money where it goes. It's the famous adage, right? Just follow the money and you'll figure out where and what's going on, sort of thing. So I guess in the world, I think one of the things that stands out to me, guys, with this, call it unholy alliance between cartels and terrorist organizations and gangs, is the amount of money that's coming from illicit activities, whether it's child sex trafficking, drug trafficking, all of these things that they already have a lot of skills of keeping below the radar. I mean, Victor Avila, who was the one, ICE agent who survived in the Fast and Furious shootout, his partner, Agent Zapata, died in his arms. He said to me, sorry, DEA, not ICE. He said to me, for every bust that they had and they put it out on the table, it's X amount of millions. He said, every one of those, there's 1,000 more that we never hear of and never catch. So there's a lot of money obviously being made from, like, call them these financial webs. And, at this point, now you're way beyond soldiers. You're into, I'm not in a, I'm trying to think of the right word, not in a more significant or ferocious way, but you need forensic accountants to get into this stuff that hopefully lead to some sort of sanctions, asset seizures, so on and so forth. But again, this overlap between cartels, insurgents, terrorists, gangs, this is a whole new dynamic. It started in the 90s, my understanding, but it's exploded in the past 10 years. And I don't know how sophisticated we are at catching this, because again, for everyone you see, there's 1,000 that you don't. So Khalid, back to you for a second. What are the most significant trends, let's say, I don't know if that's the right word, but how they're generating and laundering money, whether they be terrorist cartels or in cahoots?
Well, the biggest problem you've got is the terrorist networks are now moving cash, bundles of cash, because when you start looking at banking transactions, they're easy to track. When you start looking at trying to move illicit money, that's easy to track and it's easy to catch. But if you start sending millions of dollars in barrels of oil that looks like barrels of oil, you'll never even know that's there.
Wow.
And that money comes into a country, gets distributed, and it gets used for nefarious practices. We hit a house here in the tribal agency in Pakistan. Chris, I kid you not. The closet was full of money, cash money. And it was all nicely wrapped in plastic. This is $1 million. This is 500,000. This is and they just had bundles of cash, dollars, euros, rupees, every currency they needed to move. They had it sitting right there. It was an entire closet. We sat there and counted it. There was something like $15 million when we added it all up. $15 million in a closet, cash. When you talk about the way the terrorist networks are moving, the biggest advantage for terrorist networks has been crypto. Your first thing is crypto. The second thing is using stuff like Moderno. You can move money without any kind of track. And the account is made, you move the money, you delete the account. So whatever track or trace there is, that's wiped out when you delete the account. Trying to track them is very difficult because there's a company that's come out now. It's called Arkham. I was reading about them today. That is now going to start tracking cryptocurrency transactions. We have always run anonymous cryptocurrency transactions. What Arkham does is they make it so it's no longer anonymous. They break the blockchain. So they know what ID sent money to what ID, so they can actually track the money. So slowly your cryptocurrency is moving from the decentralized exchanges to a centralized exchange running through Arkham. That has been done because Donald Trump wants to standardize cryptocurrency in the US. So taking away the advantage the terrorists have had for so many years, now you've created Arkham, which is part of the Palantir system.
Oh,
Again,
wow.
Peter Thiel again is involved in this. So what he's done is he's created a company, he's invested in a company called Arkham. And what that does is it takes away the anonymous part of cryptocurrency. So you can track where money is coming from, how much is coming, what country it originated from, what account it originated from, what telephone number it originated from, and who ended up getting it in cash. And then when you move that cash into a bank account, it tracks it to that bank account as well. So now you've taken away that one advantage. So now all that's left is either moving product and letting them sell that for cash, or moving actual cash.
Wow, that's interesting. And that brings me to a question for you, Mike. It seems to me that the common theme here is these supply chains, whether it's money or tangible goods, is traversing like multiple different jurisdictions. And I can only imagine how hard it would be to coordinate across all those jurisdictions to, say, seize money or assets. And you don't have to answer this question if you don't want to, but in my mind, the $64,000 question is, does that just make us go covert and say, screw all these jurisdictions and we're just going to go black on this and get the job done? Is that something that, is a regular occurrence, or is that just in the movies?
Well, the difficult thing is if we're tracking money overseas, it's just not how we send or track money in America. It's very different. So if you take an FBI agent, for example, who's been trained at Quantico at tracking white collar cases that involve financial fraud, he's going to not have any clue how to operate overseas. Here's a great example. In I'm not sure if it's still the same in Islamabad, but when I was there, to get a SIM card, you're supposed to show ID. Nobody has to show ID, but you sign a piece of paper. And when you sign the piece of paper, you sign it however you want. I used to literally just draw an X and then get a SIM card. So how do you track that SIM card? You don't. The answer is you don't. If you're an American and the person works for, ISI, one of the organizations that's tracking intel in whatever country, then sure, you might be affiliated with that account. But if you're not, let's say you show up and you get a SIM card, you put in your phone. Well, the world sends Western Union. And you know how easy it is to send Western Union overseas? It's very easy. And it's probably billions, if not trillions of dollars every day. I mean, it's insane the amount of people from Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, all of the billions of people transacting billions, if not trillions of dollars every single day. How are you going to track that? The answer is you're not. And so there are really good ways to send money and to funnel it. And here's the bottom line. It's called an IOU. A lot of these organizations are going to work with terrorists or affiliate groups that are not going to transact cash. It's not like the movies. You show up, you got the cash, you hand over the cash, you get the guns. They're going to transact, and then they're going to give them the money at a later time, whichever way is more efficient and more secure. So again, it is the hardest thing to track. And the days of utilizing physical cash to send to somewhere in a gross sum, it doesn't happen anymore. I mean, it happens locally because, like, out of that closet that Khalid was talking about, he's working a network, right? He's got to pay people every single day. He's receiving a lot of money and moving money. And so the cash flow is apparent. But if we're talking about transacting for terrorist organizations that are sending, billions of dollars to get billions of dollars worth of weapons, they're not going to send a shipping container with billions of dollars of cash. It's not going to have. It's not how it's going to work. They're going to fund it through business development, through commercial cover, through partitioning it over time, Western Union, or one of these more creative things like Bitcoin, for example. And Bitcoin being tracked now, man, imagine the resistance in America when we start doing that and rolling that out. Well, guess what? The rest of the world is 10 years behind. I mean, if ever going to catch up to that regulation, they're just not going to abide by it.
So before I go to Khalid with the last question for this segment, let's just say we were able to clear some of these hurdles, whether it be, financial or tangible goods. I'm just curious, which one on average has a bigger impact? Are you taking their money away or taking away their tangible goods that they bought with the money?
I'm just going to lean on the money. I mean, it's the money is a problem, but just like with the good, there's always more goods somewhere else. There's always more money somewhere else. I always love it when I see the DEA or the FBI do a big video or picture where they're showing all the money that they confiscated and the 50 guns. The FBI just did it with the 2,200 guns they got off the street. You know how much a dent that makes? It's like zero dent.
Yeah.
It's like zero. And the $15 million of cash you confiscated during the FBI raid, you know how much of a dent that is? It's no dent. It makes no dent. In fact, more so, it shows you the organizations and the operation and the task organization of how they got it done, which means that they're going to be further away from finding the players that actually count.
Wow. Yep. Yeah, that's incredible. So, Khalid, I want to ask you, are there any examples of where we've created this financial disruption for terrorists and actually been able to, put them on their heels for a period of time or potentially completely disable them? Or is it just not a thing? Like, it's just too complex?
Well, there was a time when, in the beginning of GWAT, there was a lot of focus on the Hawala networks. And a lot of limitations were put on how you could move Hawala. For those who don't know, Hawala works like this. I give somebody $50,000 here in Islamabad. And I say, I want to send this to Chris Heaven. He's in Florida. And this is his telephone number. They take the $50,000 from me. They make a phone call to another dealer in Florida. The money doesn't leave Pakistan. He calls a guy in Florida and says, you need to call up a guy named Chris Heaven. This is his number. Give him $50,000. And they do their accounting once a year, twice a year, where everyone sits down and they hand over cash to each other. They move it through the banks or they move it through any other system. That was limited at one point. When that was limited, all of a sudden the terrorist movement and their abilities were stopped because the amount of cash they could get was being tracked. I remember we used to have Hawala dealer in Peshawar that I did a lot of work with. And when I went to him and said, listen, I need to send some money, he goes, no. Now the government wants an ID card. You don't do this. Find another way. And we were backed off of Hawala because of that, because the government started doing that. It's like Mike was talking about. There was a time when in Pakistan, you literally just signed an agreement. There was no ID. There was no passport. You would just sign an agreement and say, okay, I want a SIM card. Now the government of Pakistan, because of the amount of terrorism here, you cannot get a SIM card without giving them your ID card. But guess what? We found a way around that as well. We pay somebody $10,000 and he goes, gets a SIM in his name, hands it off to somebody else.
Wow. That's interesting. So we're going into the final segment now, which is emerging threats, strategies, those sort of things. And it seems to me like these networks, based on comments from both of you, that these things are evolving, especially with this, call it enhanced integration between cartels and, terrorist organizations using encrypted stuff like you just mentioned, and Bitcoin. Plus, it seems to me like it, and I want to get some clarification from you, Mike. I've got a couple questions, but it seems to me that there's a lot of chiefs involved in this. So you got a lot of heads of a lot of different organizations all playing a role in this kind of complex stuff. And, I'm wondering moving forward as well, what type of real-time intelligence are we looking at? Because I asked the guys earlier, Mike, about AI, and could AI be used as the terrorist against us, and how? And I'm thinking vice versa as well. Could we use AI, for example, to track where this money is, changing hands, because it can, parse so much data so fast. And then I guess the next part to it is the I'm trying to think of the word, the coupling of kinetic and non-kinetic stuff. So hitting them in the pocket, financial, hitting them with cyber attacks, beefing up our law enforcement, beefing up our military, all of those things together to try and take down these adversaries. And then, how do we build resilience into our own system? Because I personally think that we don't have a whole lot of resilience. And Charlie 19 showed us that, when of all things, you get toilet paper disappeared, finding ammo, was brutal. There were some pretty stark examples of how fragile our supply chain is. And I guess like this final segment is kind of focused on the ultimate goal. How do we stop these coordinated large scale operations that traverse all of these different things? So I know I kind of threw a bunch of big word salad out there. Just call me Kamala Harris, but I'm wondering, Mike, what you think the next, major leap will be for us as far as being able to hunt these adversaries, and what's the biggest leap you see them getting in technologies that's going to make it really hard for us to find them? And Khalid, kind of spoke to this a little bit.
Look, I think the best way we could address these issues is having more assets and human beings on the ground. I don't think you're going to get it done with any piece of tech. One of the problems that we're seeing now is the adaptability of breakout splinter groups, not cells, but groups, partisan forces of organizations that are being developed and cohorted and supported based on the main entity catching the heat. And it's just a basic tactic. I mean, it's a drug dealer tactic, right? You're
Right.
selling drugs, you got the heat on you, you divert your supply chain to a lower level guy, give him the command authority to get it done. And the next thing you know, to be able to target them, you have to stretch your resources. So whereby you might have a, counter-terrorism cell tracking a network. Well, guess what? Under their own nose, there's another network being established and built. Well, then you got to shift your attention and resources there. And the limitation in all of this is there's not enough task force. There's not enough, operators in the world to be able to track all this stuff. So you look at that with the inevitability of them going underground, you have no chance. And so what's likely to happen is the guys that you're looking at are no longer actual players. They're just representatives. And the actual guys doing the work are underground completely. And we saw that a little bit, especially in Pakistan and Afghanistan. I mean, here's the greatest example in real time. When we were tracking terrorists in Kunduz and Mazar Sharif, because it had basically been forgotten about for so long, because we let the Germans go in there in around 2010, and they did absolutely nothing. They actually said it was safe. Well, it's safe if you don't leave the wire. That's your perception, right? If you don't leave, then it's perfectly safe. All we did was throw up an ISR platform and started watching patterns of movement in life. Every single night, you would get multiple groups moving from safe house to safe house. And we're like, holy crap, no comms at all. No, not just cell phones, but no ICOM traffic, no RF traffic, zero communication. Okay, let's get some human in there. No human intelligence could touch it. So the only way to track it is to watch patterns of life. And then when you got 10 different groups moving in 10 different directions every 3 hours, which is what their pattern was doing, I was like, I'm getting myself chills of how talented these terrorists are. Because not only are they operating underground, but they're basically diversified so much that you have to make a decision. There's 10 groups moving at the same time every 3 hours from safe house to safe house. Oh, by the way, they're not designated safe houses. They're just people's houses they're taking over.
Wow.
So you can't go in there and commit to a raid and attack a village and then hit a house, because it's just a family that's being taken over. So then you go, okay, well, we only can target one. And then you take one at a time. But guess what? The 9 other groups were getting through and then killing coalition forces. So then you go back and you go, hey, task force, Colonel Carrilla at the time, or General Carrilla at the time, can we get more assets? We don't have any more assets to give. Okay, well, we've reached a limitation. And guess what? Where we stop 1, 9 are getting through. And then you take that all over every province in Afghanistan, it's a losing war. And then we're like, we're out of here, right? So this is how these things compound themselves. And then when you look at the FBI and all the things that they're involved in, from political conspiracy and Epstein files and everything else, where are their resources going to be? Well, I guarantee you they're not looking at these problem sets right now, and somebody's going to drop the ball.
So I think you answered my next question. My next question was going to be, can we ever get ahead of the curve on this proactively, or are we stuck in a permanent reactive state?
Yeah, not only, I mean, the goal is to be responsive and not reactive, right? You want to get the one up. You want to be able to leapfrog these problem sets. Not only are we just going to be behind, but it's going to get worse, because every single day that we're not basically proactively taking these guys off the battlefield and then working with other countries to develop a campaign to stop this culturally, then they continue to breed. Every single day, there's more terrorists being made in Lebanon, in Gaza, in Syria, in Afghanistan, and you can't stop that. You can't stop the birth rate of terrorists that are being born into the jihadist movement. And unfortunately, I hate to say this, but likely our grandchildren will be fighting this campaign in a more profound way than we are.
Man, that is extremely sobering, Mike. It's crazy. So, Khalid, last question goes to you. I don't know how much our audience knows, but you're a comp sci graduate, so you've got a lot of knowledge in the technology world. And I'd like you to just go a step beyond what we did initially with Randy and Jeff, as far as the role of technology, whether it's AI, big data, modeling, whatever the case may be, potentially play in disrupting the logistics and leadership nodes of all of the organizations we've discussed tonight.
Well, Chris, the first problem you got to understand is that most terrorists have gone off the grid. They're not on technology anymore. When you're not using technology, you can't track them.
So you're saying that they've gone from digital back to analog stuff?
They are literally using couriers. In Afghanistan, when we're tracking terrorists, there are marks on walls that are used as communication. Guy walks by with a mark on the wall and keeps walking. And the guy who has to come through, he knows what that mark means.
Mike, was this the dead drop stuff that you were talking about?
It's similar to a dead drop. It's dead drop communication. Yeah, just various forms of it. It could be a dead letter. It could be a dead mark, but it's basically the most effective means of communication without being detected.
The problem you guys, because your terrorist community has figured out that you guys are doing signal intelligence on them. So what they've done is they've gone off the grid. So when they go off the grid, you can't track them anymore.
Here's a piece of irony for you, and then, pick this up and run with it. So Mike, the other person I know who was an E9, and he was in the Marines, not the Army. He was a sniper, actually. He had a really good mind for marketing. And our head office was in Gainesville, Florida, which is it's a blue dot in a red state, so to speak, right? And we had all of these old shirts that they'd been, faded out, sitting in a warehouse and stuff. He handed them out to all of the homeless community in Gainesville, Florida, which is a very large homeless, community, like every Democrat city, right? So he ended up becoming friends with these guys, and they started explaining to him, I don't even know what the hell you call it, but homeless hieroglyphics.
Hobo language. It's called hobo language.
Run with that, Khalil. Tell our audience about. I had never heard of this shit.
There is an underground language that's used. We know it in the terrorist community. I mean, you and I have had this conversation privately, that we have a code book we use that covers all of the terrorist markings, that we understand exactly what every mark they use means. The hobos, the homeless, have the same language. They communicate in a way with each other that they never use a real word. It's a sound, it's a mark, it's a hand signal of some kind. They are communicating in a way that we'll never understand. The terrorists do the exact same thing.
Wow.
It goes back to that statement that I made earlier. They're playing chess while you're playing checkers. You're running SIGINT, they're running couriers. One guy who goes between Haqqani and Habitullah, one guy that goes between Hamza and Haqqani, and he carries that letter. And that can be handed over to 3 different people before it gets to that main courier. So if anyone's tracking him, it gets dropped at some point. The beauty of the beauty and the complexity that terrorist networks operate with makes it so difficult to track them that no matter what technology you try, I put drones in the air, you're still not going to be able to find them. Because every day, it's like Mike was saying, every day there are paper tigers created. Terrorist groups that have a name for all of 1 week, they carry out one operation and they disappear again. You have leadership that is distributed from throughout provinces. That if this guy's taken out, the guy in this province takes over leadership. If that guy's taken out, the guy in this province takes over leadership. If this guy's taken out, there is so much redundancy built into terrorist networks that cutting the head off the snake doesn't exist. What we were able to achieve by taking out Hafiz Gul Bahadur and all of his leadership in one drone strike in Coast in one night, that will cripple that entire organization, because whoever was next in line was sitting in that house, and whoever was after him, and whoever was after him, and whoever was after him, and whoever was after him. We took out 12 people. That was all the core leadership of the Hafiz Gul Bahadur group, including the boss. That means for the next 3 to 4 months, they are not going to have a leadership structure. So ground commanders will take over leadership now. They will run operations, they will run attacks until a senior leader is put in place for them. The redundancy makes it difficult to fight them. This is why after 15 years, we're still going, how do we stop them? Because every time we shift to what they're doing, they go 2 steps in a different direction. It's almost like, and Mike understands this, it's almost like you're playing Moscow rules, where while you're moving to what they're doing, they're jumping 2 steps away off of that. And you're going, wait a minute, how did they get there?
Well, I know. Yeah, this is a fascinating topic. So I lied. You get the last question, Mike. When you were deployed, whether it be Iraq, Afghanistan, or other points in the Middle East, did you see this stuff? These hieroglyphics that look like graffiti that you discovered was actually a way of communicating, the terrorists communicating with each other? Well, because that's what was communicated to me in Gainesville. You look at it, think it's just random graffiti, and it's not. It's instructions.
I don't think. I mean, it's most often that there are means of communication that we haven't identified. I mean, because think about when we do a target, we hit it, we clear that objective, and we look at the SSE, and we spend so little. I used to complain about this all the time, that we spend so little time analyzing the sensitive site exploitation, because you get on target, the guys would take all the stuff, throw it in a garbage bag, and then we take it back, dump it into a partition thing, divide it all up. Well, then we would leave it up to the intel experts to do that, but they had so much going on. We didn't take the time to actually analyze or assess any of it. And if we didn't have good intelligence dudes to do that, well, guess what? You weren't capitalizing on the potential intel trove that existed. And so it was always there. There are always means of covert communications in so many forms, including cell phones, the way that they communicate on cell phones with emojis or specific pro words, or using the three letters per word, meaning something else. It's like you would just see a list of numbers and then just write it off like it's just garbage or dundage, and then you get rid of it and move on. It's like these guys are a lot more intelligent in operating this space, because that's how they live. They live in that. And these Western ideals on how things should be don't apply in that world, which is, to bring it all home, is so important to understand the significance of global war on terror, veterans, civilians, experience. Because you only get that once in a lifetime and once in a generation that you're going to be able to capitalize on. Imagine 20 years, 30 years from now when all the GWAT veterans are in their 70s and 80s and forgotten about, and then that institutional knowledge doesn't exist at all. Well, guess what? You're going to have to start over. It's going to be like the Cold War again, post World War II, where we're looking at things and we're like, what are we even doing? I mean, the garrison military of the 80s and 90s in the American military was a joke. I mean, we were still using, cravats as tourniquets, just as an analogy that we were way behind. And then we learned hard lessons until we kind of figured it out. And just when we figured it out, it's over, but it's not over. It's over for us temporarily, but it's not over for them, and it never has been.
Man, that's what a fascinating and complex, tangled web these bad guys weave. It's mind-boggling for somebody who hasn't been in a role like you guys have. But that's the end of our main topic tonight. So now we get to do my favorite part of the entire broadcast. Now I get to pretend that I'm John Madden and it's 1987 playing Monday Night Football. I tell you, I get deja vu every time I see that. So we're on to the Carnival hero of the day. And I don't think I'm even going to explain this other than to say that bystander becomes a hero after stopping a robbery. It's only 25 seconds long. So the guy in the blue shirt who got out, he was being carjacked by the other three. This good Samaritan comes along and sends them all into next week. That just cracks me up. But anyway, that's the Carnival hero of the day. Now, the next one, there's actually two videos here, and I believe Roe is the one who sent. Yeah, Roe sent them in this morning. And this is some pretty crazy stuff, man. This one's 1 minute long. I'm going to play both of these and love to hear feedback from both of you. But check this shit out. 60 seconds long.
There's no sound, Chris.
You're kidding. I've got sound here. Nothing?
No, nothing here.
Oh, son of a bitch. Let's try the next one. I've got sound here. Any sound on that?
Nope.
All right. I don't know what's going on there, but you know what I'll do is I'll just put them in the comment section for everybody. I have no idea why you're not getting the sound on those because I get the sound fine here. Basically, those two people put out threatening videos on X that said if the government doesn't, go back to work and they lose their SNAP money, their food stamp money, that they're going to shoplift whatever they want. And if you're a white person and they see you in a parking lot with a buggy full of groceries, they're going to take your groceries at gunpoint. And those are two of multiple videos that have cropped up over the past few days. When I see a whole ream of them come out like this, it makes me wonder how organic or how not organic it is. Give me your thoughts on that, each of you. Do you believe this is truly organic, or is it something that just is being? Go ahead, you go first, then, Khalid.
This is speed. And when you see more than 5 or 6 videos or 10 videos come out at one time, that's been generated. That's not organic in any way, shape, or form. Especially when you listen to what they're saying and the script kind of matches each other. That then tells you that this is going to happen. The Democrats are screwed. They know they're screwed because if I was Donald Trump, I would hold this shutdown long enough for this food stamp thing to kick in so that they don't get their benefits. That will teach the Democrats a lesson they will never forget, because that's the biggest threat right now. If they're going to get hostile, you'll get more arrests. You'll get a lot of illegals as well. So there is a plus side that comes out of this.
Mike, your impression, is this organic viral stuff or is it subterfuge that's been planned?
Same thing that Khalid said, verbatim.
That's just like the bad guys in the videos. Same thing verbatim.
I texted him before we got that.
That's too funny. So we're at the conflicted question of the night point. So conflictedthegame.com. Nelson had survived several encounters with death, largely due to the group of people he belonged to. They were few in number, but loyal friends who were well organized. Supplies were extremely low, but they were getting by. While moving around with his group, Nelson ran into an old fiance. She had someone with her, and both of them wanted to join Nelson's group. Nelson said this was a group decision. If you were in Nelson's group, would you be willing to add people who brought little to the table into your group? Why or why not? And of course, this is in a post-apocalyptic setting. So, Mike, I'll go to you first. You've got a MAG. We're in a post-apocalyptic scenario. So for those of you who don't know, a MAG, mutual assistance group, what do you do when new people come along and say, hey, I want to be part of your group, but you only know them, very little, or you only know one out of a group of people? How do you handle that, Mike?
Well, I'm willing to bring on anybody and to give them a shot. I just would create a timeline and some standards on expectations. I mean, it's easy for me to onboard anybody, but as soon as they become a liability, because I identify they're a liability with a little bit of time, which I think is needed, then they're out. So I'd be quick. I'd be quick to accept, and then quick to push them out if necessary.
No, that's wise. That's good. Khalid?
I wouldn't be as generous as Mike. If you're bringing nothing to the table, well, it says it in the question. They bring little to the table. So if you're bringing little to the table, you'll only last so long with me. But you'll take more from us than you'll give us in return. So what's the point of even including you?
So what's the punishment for taking from Khalid?
No, we don't punish. We're not going to punish this time. We'll let them survive on their own, but they survive independently. They don't get anything from us.
Yeah, I don't recall if you've heard this or not, Mike, but Khalid's answer to any calamity that happens: battlefield execution, high-speed lead poisoning, problem solved.
Back of the head.
Oh, it's too much. So just final thoughts wrapping up here. Head on over to deaddropintel.org. So Mike and Khalid have put together a team of intelligence experts, and the content is phenomenal. I'm not involved on the front end. I'm just like the techie guy in the back end because I'm not an expert in the field. These guys work with intelligence on a regular basis, but there's some pretty big names over there. You've got these two guys. You've got Sarah Adams doing stuff. And if you follow me on X, you notice I've taken some of her stuff and converted it into, short videos. Just people like to watch videos, but phenomenal stuff. Deaddropintel.org. Our friend Ryan Geho's over there writing articles. Keith Graves from Christian Warrior Training. Somebody who has the initials JD, who shall go unnamed, amongst others. So deaddropintel.org. Check that out. Survivaldispatch.news. That's our Substack. Do me a favor. The top 100 is predicated on who got the most new members over the previous 24 hours. You don't have to be a paying member. If you're a free member, it still counts. There's no fancy algorithm or anything. As a free member, you're helping us get our message to more people. And you still get all of our ThreatWire security bulletins, which, like I said, John Wheaton is killing it with those things. You get our sit reps. You get early access to JJ Morris's instructional videos. If you pay, just check it out. There's a list like this long of benefits that you get. Probably the biggest one would be our signal channels. We have 3 signal channels now. We're contemplating adding a 4th one because they're very specific. But Dr. Michael Fabian, get this into Mike Glover. Dr. Michael Fabian and I were doing a bunch of shortwave HF antenna testing on the weekend, and he's a trauma surgeon, right? And he said, man, I've been working all these extra shifts. There's been all kinds of shit going on. He pulls the phone up, puts it to me. He hadn't read our signal chat in over a week, and there was 12,000 messages that he hadn't read. So I told him, hey, next time when we get together to test antennas, there will be a quiz. There will be a test. I want your thoughts on all this stuff. But anyway, there's a lot of awesome people in our private signal chats and some incredible information that's shared. It's probably the biggest value add of being one of our paying guardians. But that's it. We'll be back tomorrow evening, usual time, 7 p.m. Eastern, with the next episode in our long war series. And it's going to be the war of perception. So basically, insurgents and governments battling for control of public opinion and legitimacy. And I think we're seeing some of that right now with the horrible legacy media and the Antifa, trying to turn people's brains to shit by convincing them that communism is a good thing, blah, blah, blah. But other than that, one last quick shout out to our premier sponsor, Carnival. We love these guys, all American. If you're worried about the quality of the meat that you eat, go to carnival.com, use the discount code EATMEAT, all one word. You'll be well served by it. That's it. Between now and tomorrow night, please like, share, comment, subscribe. God bless America.
God bless America.